Tonight we're exploring every mythical Pokémon mystery. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. In the vast and storied world of Pokémon, there is a distinct line drawn between the creatures we can find in the tall grass and the entities that define the very fabric of reality. We are all familiar with the legends, the titans of land and sea, the masters of time and space, but there is a category of being that exists even beyond those towering figures. These are the mythical Pokémon. In the original Japanese, they are known as the illusory Pokémon, a name that perhaps better captures their true nature. They are not merely rare, they are whispers in the dark, anomalies in the code, and shadows that flicker at the edges of history. For decades, these beings have represented the ultimate frontier of the Pokémon world, existing as within the machine that most players would never encounter through ordinary means. They are the secrets that were never meant to be found, the rewards for those who looked closer at the static on the screen, and the embodiments of concepts so powerful they defy standard classification. The mystery of the mythical Pokémon began with a single, unintended glitch, a pink sprite hidden deep within the programming of the original games that changed the trajectory of the franchise forever. Since that moment, the lore of these creatures has expanded into a sprawling tapestry that covers the birth of the universe, the engineering of artificial life, and the manifestation of human emotion. To understand the mythicals is to understand the secret history of the Pokémon world itself. These are not just powerful monsters, they are the architects of the cosmos, the keepers of ancient wishes, and the survivors of cataclysms that predated human civilization by millions of years. They represent the intersection of science and spirituality, where biological evolution meets divine intervention and extraterrestrial arrival. Why do these specific creatures hold such a profound grip on our collective imagination? It is because they represent the what-if of the Pokémon journey. They are the reason we checked under the truck in Vermilion City. They are the reason we whispered about secret islands and hidden distributions. The mythical Pokémon are the gatekeepers of the unknown. When you look at the DNA of a Mew, you aren't just looking at a rare creature, you are looking at the genetic blueprint of every living thing in the world. When you contemplate the origin of Arceus, you are staring into the primordial void from which all existence emerged. These stories carry a weight that standard legendaries often lack, because mythicals are inherently tied to the idea of the impossible. They are the miracles of the Pokémon world, appearing only when the stars align, or when humanity reaches out into the darkness with a specific purpose. Tonight we are going to peel back the layers of these enigmas. We will investigate how a simple virus from the depths of space mutated into a shifting, multi-formed predator. We will explore the tragic history of a Paleozoic hunter that was dragged back from extinction only to be turned into a mechanized weapon of war. We will look into the clockwork heart of a mechanical princess built 5 centuries ago, and the shadow-dwelling entities that walk between the dimensions of our world. From the serene forests guarded by the voice of the woods to the chaotic rings of a djinn that can warp reality itself, every one of these beings tells a story about the boundaries of what is possible. The stakes of this journey are nothing less than the truth behind the Pokémon universe. If Mew truly contains the genetic code of all species, what does that say about the nature of evolution? If Arceus created the world, what was there before the egg hatched in the center of nothingness? The deeper we go, the more we realize that the Pokémon world is not just a place of adventure and competition, but a realm of deep, ancient mysteries that are often too vast for the human mind to fully comprehend. These creatures are the bridges to those mysteries. They are the keys to doors we didn't even know existed. As we move through the history of each generation, from the hidden secrets of Kanto to the modern-day revelations of the Paldea region, we will see how the concept of the mythical has evolved. It began as a rumor, a playground legend that turned out to be true, and it has grown into a sophisticated exploration of philosophy, technology, and cosmic horror. We will ask the questions that have haunted the community for nearly 30 years. How did the first humans interact with these gods? What happens when science tries to recreate the divine? And what does it mean for a Pokémon to be illusory? In a world where everything is catalogued and captured, this is a journey into the heart of the myth. It is a look at the beings that stand outside of time, the ones that grant wishes once every 1,000 years, and the ones that protect the balance of nature from the shadows. Whether they are made of stardust, gears, or pure genetic potential, the mythical Pokémon remain the most captivating part of this universe because they remind us that no matter how much we think we know, there is always something more waiting to be discovered. There is always a secret hidden in the code, a legend waiting to be told, and a mystery that defies explanation. So settle in and prepare yourself. We are going to examine every mythical Pokémon mystery, tracing the threads of lore from the very beginning to the present day, uncovering the truth behind the rarest beings to ever exist in the world of Pokémon. In 1996, when Pokémon Red and Green first launched in Japan, the game cartridges contained a secret that would define the franchise for decades to come. Hidden in the code, buried deep among the data for 151 monsters, there was a ghost, a piece of data that was never meant to be there, but once it was discovered, it changed everything. This is the story of the ghost in the machine. The developer behind this ghost was a programmer named Shigeki Morimoto. During the final stages of development, when the game was nearly complete and the team was polishing the last details, Morimoto decided to add something extra, just for himself. He wanted to create a secret Pokémon that only the developers would know about. Something that could be used for testing, or maybe just for fun. So, in his spare time, he programmed a tiny, pink, cat-like creature from scratch. He gave it a unique move that would later become its signature, a move called Transform, and he hid it in the game's code, with no legitimate way for players to encounter it. This was the accidental inclusion of Mew in the red and blue source code. It wasn't part of the official plan, it wasn't in the design documents. It was one developer's quiet secret, slipped into the data like a hidden message in a bottle. And because the game had already gone gold, meaning the final version was locked, the code was shipped worldwide without anyone noticing. Not the producers, not the testers, not even the director. Mew existed only as a ghost, invisible to anyone who played the game normally. But ghosts have a way of making themselves known. In the months after the release, players began to hear whispers, rumors of a rare, unseen Pokémon that could only be obtained through a glitch. Some claimed they had seen it in the game's memory. Others said it could be caught under a truck near the SS Anne, the ship that never sailed. This was the birth of the truck rumor, a story spread by word of mouth and printed in unofficial guidebooks, claiming that if you used strength on a particular truck, you would reveal a hidden Mew. It was, of course, completely false. The truck was just a decoration, a static object with no interaction. But the rumor took on a life of its own, fed by the genuine mystery of an inaccessible Pokémon. And here is where the story becomes truly fascinating. The truck rumor wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a wildfire of misinformation that fueled the greatest mystery in gaming history. For years, kids across the world tried everything to get that Mew. They saved their game, taught a Pokémon strength, pushed the truck, and found nothing. But they didn't give up, they blamed themselves, or they invented new methods. They traded rumors in schoolyards and on early internet forums. The myth grew because the mystery was real. There a Mew in the game. It be obtained but not through any legitimate method, only through a series of precise glitches, like the famous Mew glitch, discovered later, which exploited a bug in the game's code involving the trainer on Route 8. All of this started with one developer's secret project. Morimoto's hidden Pokémon, never intended for public discovery, became the template for an entire classification, the mythical Pokémon. Before Mew, there was no such thing as a mythical. There were rare Pokémon, tough to find in the wild, but none that were completely unobtainable through normal play. Mew broke that pattern. It was the first Pokémon that could only be acquired through external events. Official distribution at game tournaments, promotional giveaways, or special download events. That exclusivity became its identity, and when Game Freak saw how much the fans craved this elusive creature, they realized they had stumbled onto something powerful. The concept of a mythical Pokémon was born not from a grand design, but from a programmer's whim, an accidental inclusion, and the chaotic energy of a rumor mill. So the ghost in the machine became a legend. But Mew's story doesn't end with the rumor. In fact, that is only the beginning. The creators had to decide what this mysterious Pokémon actually was. What was its origin? Why was it so rare? And they chose to give it the most profound backstory imaginable. The little pink cat that a developer added for fun was recast as the genetic ancestor of all Pokémon, holding the DNA of every species in its cells. That is the deep history we're about to explore. How Mu's accidental presence in the code led to the narrative of a primordial being, the source of all life. Next, we'll dive into the truth behind its DNA and why it is called the genetic ancestor. The developer who slipped Mew into Pokémon Red and Green likely never imagined what he had set in motion. That single act of creative mischief was more than a rumor. It was the first crack in a facade that would eventually reveal an entire hidden stratum of Pokémon existence. And if that hidden data was the ghost in the machine, then Mew itself is the genetic ghost in the blood of every Pokémon that has ever lived. To understand why, we have to go to Cinnabar Island. Not the resort town, not the gym, not the volcano, but the laboratory, the Pokémon Mansion, they called it, though it felt more like a tomb for science. The journals you can find scattered in that crumbling building tell a story that is both wondrous and deeply disturbing. They record the discovery of Mew deep in the jungles of South America, a new species. But they also record the birth of Mewtwo, and between those lines, they document something even more unsettling: the systematic analysis of Mew's cellular structure. The scientists on Cinnabar were not just cataloguing a rarity, they were peeling back the very blueprint of life. What they found in Mew's DNA was not merely a unique genetic sequence, it was a library, a complete, compressed archive of the genetic information for every single Pokémon species that would ever exist. The journals describe it in clinical terms: nucleotide sequences that matched species from every known region, from the common Rattata to the legendary birds. The implication was staggering. Mew was not just the ancestor of Pokémon, it was the template, the first draft, the prototype from which all others were derived or diverged. But the ethical nightmare is what haunts those pages. The researchers did not stop at observation. They used that genetic code, they extracted, edited, replicated. They created Mewtwo not from scratch but by forcibly reshaping Mew's own DNA, trying to amplify its power to weaponize the ancestor. The journals are cold, detached, almost clinical in their horror. They speak of failed experiments, of cells that screamed in petri dishes, of subjects that were destroyed because they were too unstable. And through it all, Mew itself remained elusive, a living ghost that seemed to know it was being hunted. The scientists never captured it, not really. They only had fragments, hair, skin cells, a few drops of blood from a tranquilized encounter, and from those fragments they built a god of war. This is why Mew remains the only Pokémon capable of learning every single technical machine, every TM, every HM. Think about that. There are hundreds of machines, each containing a programmed move, from the simplest cut to the most esoteric Dream Eater, and Mew can learn them all. Not because it is particularly adaptable in the way that, say, a humanoid Pokémon might be, but because its genetic architecture contains the potential for every move, every technique, every energy pattern that exists in the Pokémon world. It is not learning, it is remembering. The TMs are not teaching Mew something new. They are triggering something dormant. The machine's data aligns with a sequence already present in Mew's DNA, a sequence that matches the move's origin in some ancestral species. It is as if Mew's body holds the fossil memory of every attack ever performed by any Pokémon. It does not adapt to the machine. The machine merely unlocks a door that was always there. And that brings us back to the Cinnabar journals. In the final entries, before the mansion was abandoned, there is a sense of dread creeping in. The lead researcher writes about a pattern he cannot explain. He calls it the silent echo. In Mew's genetic code, he found sequences that did not correspond to any known Pokémon. Sequences that seemed to predict future species that would not exist for millions of years. He wondered if Mew was not an ancestor at all, but a blueprint projected backward through time. A message from the future of evolution, written in the past. That thought was too dangerous. The project was shut down, the data was sealed, and Mew slipped back into the shadows of myth, but the echo remains. And it resonates in a very different way when you consider another mythical Pokémon. One that does not deal in genetics, but in time itself. Because if Mew's DNA contains the blueprint of all Pokémon across all eras, then perhaps the creature that lives in Ilex Forest, that guards the flow of time, holds the key to why that blueprint exists in the first place. That is a story for another night. Tonight, let the image of that Cinnabar journal entry linger. A scientist, alone in a cold lab, staring at a genetic sequence that should not exist, realizing that the past he is studying is actually a prophecy. From the journals of Cinnabar Island, we descended into the dark heart of genetic manipulation. We saw how a single Pokémon's DNA became the blueprint for all life, and we walked the ethical tightrope of creation itself. But now we step away from laboratories and into the deep ancient wood. We step into the Ilex Forest, where time doesn't flow the same way it does for you and me. The Ilex Forest in Johto is a place of quiet sanctuary. Towering trees filter sunlight into a perpetual green twilight, and the air is thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. At the heart of this forest lies a small shrine, unassuming and weathered, carved from stone that predates any known settlement. It is not a monument to a king, nor a hero, but to a Pokémon so elusive that for generations it was considered a myth within the myth. That Pokémon is Celebi, the voice of the forest, and for a brief confounding moment in the late 1990s, the entire Pokémon world was captivated by a single object, the GS Ball. This mysterious Pokeball, adorned with gold and silver accents, was given to the player in Pokémon Gold and Silver. It could not be opened, it could not be used, and it seemed to serve no purpose except to be taken to the Ilex Forest Shrine. Players were told that if they placed the ball on the shrine's pedestal, something would happen. But nothing did. The game simply ended with the ball still in your possession. The GS Ball became the first great unsolvable mystery of the franchise, a cultural phenomenon that sparked rumours, fan theories, and countless hours of speculation. It was a deliberate enigma, a story fragment left incomplete, and the answer, as we would later learn, involved a creature that isn't bound by linear time. Celebi is a Pokémon that lives across every moment simultaneously. It travels through the ages, not as a visitor, but as a permanent resident of past, present, and future all at once. This ability is not a power it uses for amusement. It is a biological necessity for Celebi. Time travel is the mechanism by which it fulfills its role as guardian of the ecosystem. When a forest is threatened, Celebi can return to a time before the threat emerged, planting seeds, restoring nutrients, or even preventing a disaster before it begins. It is a temporal gardener, pruning the timeline so that Johto's forests, and by extension, the entire region's natural balance, remain healthy. The Ilex Forest Shrine is not just a resting place, it is a nexus, a point where Celebi's timeline intersects with ours. Placing the GS Ball on that shrine was never about catching it. It was about acknowledging a connection, a request for passage. But the tragedy of Celebi runs deeper than any failed game event. Consider the implications of a consciousness that exists across multiple timelines. Simultaneously, you and I experience one moment after another. We mourn what we lose, we hope for what we might gain. Celebi experiences every moment at once. Every forest fire that ever happened, it feels that pain now. Every sapling that will grow in 1,000 years, it celebrates that growth now. The loss of a single Pokémon species in one timeline is a permanent scar across all of Celebi's being. It cannot forget, because it never forgets anything. It cannot move on, because it is always present. Celebi is not a joyful time traveller hopping through history. It is a being that bears the weight of all the world's ecological grief all at once, forever. And yet Celebi continues to protect. It returns to the shrine in Ilex Forest to heal the land, to restore what humans and nature have broken. The GS Ball mystery was never solved in the games. It was quietly abandoned, never officially resolved, but in a way, that is fitting. Some mysteries are not meant to be closed. They are meant to remind us that there are forces in this world that do not answer to our curiosity, that maybe, just maybe, is still waiting and Celebi is still watching from every angle of time. From the green silence of Ilex Forest, we will now lift our eyes to the night sky, because there is a star that grants wishes, and its name is Jirachi. But unlike Celebi, who lives with the weight of eternity, this Pokémon sleeps for 1,000 years, waiting for a single moment of awakening. The next chapter, titled The Star of Wishes, will ask you what you would wish for if you only had 7 days. From the Ilex Forest to the desert wastes of Hoenn, the thread of time and myth weaves on. Celebi protected the delicate balance of Johto's forests, but what of the creatures that slumber beneath the sands, waiting for a celestial cue? There is a star that only appears once in a millennium, and with it a being stirs. This is the story of Jirachi, the Star of Wishes. For 999 years, Jirachi does not exist in any meaningful way. It is not dead, but it is not truly alive. It rests inside a crystalline cocoon, suspended in a dreamless sleep, buried deep in the bedrock of the Hoenn region. The only thing that can rouse it is the light of the Millennium Comet, a celestial body that arcs through the heavens once every 1,000 years. When the comet's glow touches the crystal, Jirachi awakens for exactly 7 days. Then it returns to slumber for another 1,000 years. Think of the tragedy in that. A creature of immense power, capable of granting any wish, spends 99.9% of its existence in total oblivion. It has no memory of its previous awakenings. It does not grow, it does not age, it does not experience the world. It simply waits. And when it does open its eyes, it is greeted by a world that has changed beyond recognition. The people who once knew it are long dead. The civilizations it might have helped are dust. It has no companions, no continuity, only a fleeting week of consciousness before the darkness closes in again. Yet Jirachi is not a tragic figure in the human sense. It does not appear to lament its fate. In the brief moments it is awake, it radiates an almost childlike innocence. It is playful, curious, and eager to help. But that innocence is the source of its greatest danger. Jirachi's ability to grant wishes is not a calculated power. It is a raw, instinctive response to desire, and human desires are never simple. This is where the true eye comes in. On Jirachi's stomach is a third eye, usually closed. When the Millennium Comet's energy is at its peak, that eye opens. It glows with a light that seems to pierce through reality itself. The eye is the conduit for wish granting. But it is not a benevolent tool. It does not judge the wish. It does not weigh the consequences. It simply manifests the desire into existence, exactly as it is spoken, with no filter, no safety net. A wish for wealth might summon gold, but it could come from a collapsing mountain. A wish for love might bind someone to you, but without their will. The true eye is a mirror held up to the human heart, and not all hearts are pure. The connection between Jirachi and the Millennium Comet runs deeper than mere awakening. The comet's energy is the same energy that pulses through the land of Hoenn itself. Hoenn is a region of extremes, active volcanoes, deep ocean trenches, ancient meteorite craters. The comet's path aligns with the region's magnetic and geological anomalies. Some researchers believe that the comet is not merely a visitor, but a return, that it was once part of Hoenn, torn away in some primordial catastrophe, and that its return each millennium completes a circuit of energy that rejuvenates the land. Jirachi is the focal point of that circuit, is both the key and the lock. In this context, Jirachi is not just a wish granter, it is a regulator. Its sleep and awakening mirror the cycle of the comet, and the comet's energy sustains the life force of Hoenn's most ancient ecosystems. The hot springs of Mount Chimney, the coral growths of the seafloor, the very magma that fuels the volcanoes, all of it is tied, in ways we barely understand, to the passage of that star. When Jirachi awakens, the land itself seems to breathe a sigh of relief. When it sleeps, the energy dims, waiting for the next 1,000 years. But what happens when someone tries to control that cycle? In the depths of the desert, there are legends of a cult that once tried to keep Jirachi awake permanently, to hoard its power. They built a tower around its cocoon, a structure meant to capture the comet's light and hold it. But the energy was too much. The tower crumbled, the desert swallowed it, and Jirachi remained asleep, untouched. The lesson was clear. You cannot force a star to burn forever. It must rest, or it will consume everything. As we consider the cosmic forces that shape our world, we must also look to the skies for threats that come uninvited. For not all celestial travelers are heralds of hope. Some arrive without a comet, without a warning, and with a purpose that has nothing to do with granting wishes. They come from beyond the stars, and they do not sleep. That story is next. We ended the last chapter wrapped in the quiet tragedy of Jirachi's 1,000-year slumber, a creature bound to a comet so rare that its waking moments are measured in days, not decades. The Millennium Comet carries ancient energy, but what else might drift across the void between stars? What if something rode that light not as a passenger, but as a contagion? The answer arrived in Hoenn, without fanfare, without a shrine or a prophecy. It came as a crash, a streak of red from the sky that scorched the ocean near Moss Deep City. What witnesses described as a meteorite was not stone, it was a capsule, and inside that capsule, a biological anomaly that forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew about life itself. This was not a Pokémon born of eggs or evolution, or even the slow hand of natural selection. This was an extraterrestrial virus, a microscopic invader from somewhere beyond the atmosphere, mutated by a laser beam. You might already know the name, Deoxys, but the story of how it came to exist Reed's science fiction experiment gone horribly right. Some accounts say the original virus was harmless, drifting through space as a silent traveller. Then it encountered a laser, perhaps from an asteroid mining operation, perhaps from something older. And that energy scrambled its genetic code in a way that should have destroyed it. Instead, it gave the virus a body, a will, and an impossible ability to reshape its own structure at the molecular level. This is where Deoxys redefined Pokémon biology. The DNA-based form-shifting mechanics are unlike anything else in the known world. Most Pokémon change forms through evolution, weather conditions, or held items. Deoxys does it with pure genetic reprogramming, instantly rewriting its own double helix to switch between 4 distinct configurations. Attack Former, with its towering arms and raw offensive power. Defense Forme, which compresses its body into a crystalline shield. Speed Form, a sleek, almost aerodynamic shape that moves faster than the eye can track. And Normal Form, a baseline balanced state that holds all the potential for transformation. Think about what that means. Every cell in Deoxys is a living computer program, capable of being rewritten in real time. The virus that started as a simple string of RNA now possessed the ability to adapt to any threat, any environment, any opponent. It was not just an alien, it was a response to the universe itself. But the moment that truly cemented Deoxys as the first true cosmic threat came at the Battle of Moss Deep. The events have been pieced together from scattered records, but the core is clear. Deoxys descended on the island space center, drawn to the very technology that had once mutated it, or perhaps seeking a way home. The resulting conflict was not a Pokémon battle in the traditional sense. It was a containment failure. The creature tore through defenses with a speed and fluidity that defied logic, switching between forms mid-strike, absorbing attacks, and retaliating with beams of pure energy. The human scientists on Moss Deep had no frame of reference for what they were dealing with. They called it a virus, but it acted like a force of nature, something that did not follow the rules of Hoenn's ecosystems or the type chart they had written. That is why Deoxys represents a threshold. Before it, every mythical Pokémon we had encountered, Mew, Celebi, Jirachi, was rooted in this world, even if they stretched the boundaries of possibility. Mew's DNA connects all life on the planet. Celebi weaves through the timeline of Yoto. Jirachi's comet is a celestial clock that still ticks inside our solar system. But Deoxys came from outside. It did not belong to any region's mythology. It had no ancestral home, no temple, no egg. It was a stranger in the truest sense, and its arrival forced the people of Hoenn to look up at the night sky and wonder what else might be out there, waiting for a laser to wake it up. The aftermath of the Moss Deep incident left more questions than answers. Some researchers speculated that Deoxys was not the only one, that the virus could have infected other bodies, other comets, other crashed capsules. Others believed that the creature's form shifting was a kind of evolutionary response designed for space travel, that it was never meant to land on a planet in the first place. And then there is the strangest detail of all. Deoxys appears to have a connection to the aurora, those shimmering curtains of light that dance at the poles. Some astronomers have noted that the patterns of Deoxys' crystalline body resemble the molecular structure of ice crystals formed in the upper atmosphere. Coincidence, or evidence that the virus, even before the laser, was somehow attuned to the electromagnetic fields of worlds. As we watch the stars over Hoenn grow dim, there is another guardian stirring in the depths of the sea, a keeper of secrets that predate even the first comet. Its name is spoken in whispers by divers and sailors, and its legacy is written in the currents that circle the planet. But that story must wait for another night, when the tide is right and the moonlight reaches the deepest trenches. For now, let the red crystal settle, and let sleep pull you beneath the waves of that same ocean, where something ancient has been waiting all along. From the cold, silent vacuum of space, we descend into the cold, silent depths of the ocean, where Deoxys arrived as a mutation born of cosmic radiation and a laser beam, Manaphy emerges from a different kind of genesis, rooted in the frigid currents of the sea. A living contradiction to everything we thought we knew about mythical Pokémon. While Deoxys redefined the boundaries of biological form with its shifting DNA, Manaphy challenges the very definition of what it means to be a mythical in the first place. Because Manaphy is not just another rare being hidden behind an event code, it is the Prince of the Ocean, and its story begins not in a warm tropical reef, but in the bitter, icy waters of an unknown northern sea. You see, Manaphy's egg is not found through normal gameplay. It is not stumbled upon in a cave or hatched from a routine breeding pair. The only way to obtain a Manaphy egg is through a special mission within the Pokémon Ranger series, a spin-off that asks you to capture Pokémon not by battling, but by drawing loops around them with a stylus. This cross-media connection is crucial, because it tells us that Manaphy exists outside the typical boundaries of the main series games. It was never meant to be caught. It was meant to be found, and then entrusted to a trainer who had proven themselves through a different kind of bond. The egg itself is said to have been discovered drifting in a cold sea, as if the ocean itself had chosen to deliver it. And when it hatches, what emerges is a small, blue translucent creature with a glowing heart-shaped core on its chest, a creature that immediately becomes known as the Prince of the Ocean. That title is not just ceremonial. Manaphy possesses the ability to bond with any Pokémon on a profound level. Thanks to its signature move, Heart Swap, it can swap stat changes with any opponent. Yes, but the deeper lore suggests something far more intimate. Manaphy can communicate with all sea-dwelling Pokémon, and it is said to be able to guide entire schools of marine life through the darkest trenches. It is the Prince, because it commands the respect of the ocean's inhabitants, not through force, but through empathy. And yet, there is a haunting loneliness to this title. Manaphy is born alone. There is no mention of a king or queen of the sea, no royal family, no court of mythical advisors. It is a prince without a kingdom, a leader without a throne. Its only legacy, it seems, is the strange offspring it can leave behind, Fionn. And here we arrive at the paradox that has puzzled lore hunters for years. Manaphy can breed. Unlike nearly every other mythical Pokémon, which are typically sterile or unable to produce eggs, Manaphy can produce a single offspring when paired with Ditto. That offspring is Fionn. But Fionn, despite being born from a mythical, is not itself a mythical. It is classified as a standard Pokémon, and its stats reflect that. It cannot evolve into Manaphy. It cannot learn Heart Swap. It does not carry the same sacred aura, the same whispered legends. So what is Fionn? Is it an imperfect copy, a diluted version of the prince's bloodline? Or is it proof that Manaphy's true power lies not in its genetics, but in something far more intangible? The games offer no explanation. They simply give you Fionn, and you are left to wonder whether you have discovered a new species or witnessed a demotion from myth to mere existence. This paradox has deep implications. If a mythical can produce non-mythical offspring, then what makes a Pokémon mythical in the first place? Is it a biological category or a cultural one? Perhaps Manaphy is the exception that proves the rule, that mythical status is not inherited, it is earned, or perhaps it is bestowed by the collective belief of the world. And that is why the Pokémon Ranger connection matters so much. In the game Pokémon Ranger, Shadows of Almia, and later in the sequel Guardian Signs, players embark on a cross-media hunt for the fabled Sea Temple. This temple, a massive underwater structure built by an ancient civilization, is said to be the resting place of the Sea Crown, a treasure that Manaphy protects. The temple can only be opened by the Rainbow Stones, artifacts that require the power of a special Pokémon to activate. And at the center of this hunt is Manaphy, appearing as both a guide and a guardian. The entire narrative arc of those games revolves around the idea that Manaphy is not just a prize to be caught, but a living legend that must be understood, respected, and protected. The Sea Temple itself is a marvel of submerged architecture. Its hallways glow with bioluminescent coral, Its chambers are filled with puzzles that require the help of captured Pokémon, and at its heart lies the Sea Crown, a radiant jewel that amplifies Manaphy's power. But the temple is also a tomb. An ancient civilization built it to honor the prince, and in doing so, they locked themselves away from the surface world, their knowledge lost to the tides. When you finally reach the core, Manaphy does not fight you. It offers a test of trust. It asks you to prove that you are worthy of its legacy, and if you succeed, it joins you not as a conquest, but as a willing companion. This is the legacy of the Sea Guardian. Manaphy is not a god. It is not a creator or a destroyer. It is a bridge between the hidden world of mythical Pokémon and the ordinary creatures of the sea. It is the reminder that even the most legendary beings can feel the cold of isolation, and that their greatest gift might be the ability to pass on something that is not quite magic, but still precious. Phione may never be a mythical, but it carries a whisper of that cold sea, a whisper of the prince's heart, and in that whisper, there is a story that refuses to be forgotten. But not all whispers are gentle. Not all myths end with a peaceful journey to the ocean floor. As we turn from the light of the Sea Temple, we must prepare to descend into the shadows of a different kind of legend. Because if Manaphy is the Prince of the Sea, then the next mythical is the Warden of Nightmares, and it has been waiting for you to close your eyes. From the cold depths of the sea, we now descend into the realm of dreams and nightmares. Manaphy's legacy was one of birth and belonging, but the creature we turn to next has no such warm beginning. In the Sinnoh region, on a desolate crescent of rock called New Moon Island, there lives a Pokémon that most people fear to even name. It is said that if you fall asleep anywhere near this being, your dreams will curdle into something dark and inescapable. This is the story of Darkrai, the Nightmare Weaver, and the myth of a necessary evil. Exile is a harsh word, yet it fits New Moon Island perfectly. Unlike the vibrant flower-covered shores of Full Moon Island across the water, New Moon Island is a barren slab of stone under an eternally overcast sky. No grass grows there, no wild Pokémon play in the surf, only the sound of the lapping waves and the echo of a single lonely creature's footsteps break the silence. According to ancient Sinnoh lore, Darkrai was not always confined to this place. It once wandered the mainland, but its very presence caused such suffering that the people begged the legendary Cresselia to intervene. Cresselia, the embodiment of Crescent dreams, was said to have driven Darkrai away, sealing it in the farthest corner of the region to protect humanity from its curse. But here is the first crack in the legend. Was Darkrai truly a monster, or was it simply a force of nature that could not control its own influence? The truth is more complicated than the bedtime stories let on. Darkrai does not actively seek out victims to torment. It does not delight in fear. In fact, the historical records and encounters we have suggest the opposite. Darkrai is a recluse. It craves solitude above all else, and its exile to New Moon Island was almost a mercy. A place where it could be alone, away from the living beings whose minds it unintentionally disturbed. But isolation does not change biology. Darkrai's ability to induce nightmares is not a conscious attack. It is a passive field, a defensive aura that surrounds the Pokémon like breath from a volcano. Anyone who drifts into sleep within its vicinity will be pulled into a dreamscape of their own deepest anxieties, trapped until they are woken, or the nightmare runs its course. There is no malice in it. Darkrai is a nightmare weaver simply because that is what it is. No more malicious than a fire that burns without intending to, and yet the consequences are dire. The condition known as the eternal sleep is the most feared outcome of a close encounter with Darkrai. Those who fall into this state never wake naturally. Their bodies lie still, their minds trapped in an endless loop of terror, until something from outside intervenes. That something is the lunar wing, a feather shed by Cresselia. According to Sinnoh tradition, a person afflicted by Darkrai's eternal sleep can only be saved by holding a lunar wing, whose gentle light cuts through the nightmare and restores the dreamer to the waking world. This relationship between Darkrai and Cresselia is one of cosmic balance. Cresselia does not destroy Darkrai, it merely counters its influence. The two are like opposing tides, one dark and inescapable, the other bright and restorative. Neither could exist without the other, because without nightmares, how would we truly appreciate the peace of a good dream? This brings us to the heart of Darkrai's misunderstood nature. The people of Sinnoh's past feared it so deeply that they branded it an evil Pokémon, a villain to be locked away. But if we look closer, a creature that has never lashed out in anger, never sought revenge for its imprisonment. It stays on New Moon Island because it knows, perhaps better than anyone, that its presence is dangerous. It is a solitary guardian of a boundary that cannot be crossed. In its own way, Darkrai is a necessary evil. It teaches us that darkness is not the enemy. It's simply a part of existence. Every dream must have its shadow, every light its fading. Darkrai is the keeper of that shadow, and it bears the weight of that role without complaint. So when you hear the legends of the nightmare Pokémon, remember the lone figure standing on that black island, staring out at the sea. It is not a monster waiting to strike. It is a protector of solitude, a being that asks only to be left alone, and in return, it will never harm you, unless you fall asleep too close, and then it cannot help what happens any more than you can. From the moonless island of exile, we will soon travel to a place of gratitude and bloom, where a tiny hedgehog-like Pokémon heals the land with a single touch. That story is one of renewal, but it begins with a heart as pure as the flower that shares its name. From the depths of an endless nightmare, we turn to something far gentler, something that blooms in the quiet aftermath of destruction. Where Darkrai represented the inescapable darkness within the mind, Shaymin embodies the opposite, a quiet, unassuming force of renewal that asks for nothing in return. This is the gratitude bloom. Shaymin is often dismissed as the smallest and most fragile of the mythical Pokémon, a hedgehog-like creature no larger than a house cat, covered in soft green fur and dotted with white flowers along its back. But to underestimate Shaymin is to misunderstand its entire purpose. It is not a fighter in the traditional sense, nor a guardian of some cosmic principle. Instead, Shaymin exists as a living antidote to the poison that humans and nature have themselves created. You see, Shaymin's most defining trait is its ability to purify toxic environments through a technique called seed flare. This is not simply a beam of energy. It is a concentrated release of life-affirming power that can neutralize pollutants in the soil, cleanse contaminated water, and even restore the air in regions choked by industry. The lore surrounding seed flare suggests that the move draws directly from the gratitude of those who have been helped, a kind of emotional photosynthesis that turns goodwill into raw, ecological healing. In the games, seed flare has a chance to sharply lower the target's SP defense, but in the world of the myth, it is a weapon of reclamation, not harm. This places Shaymin in a unique position among mythical Pokémon. It is neither the creator of the world nor the embodiment of a human emotion, like wish or fear. It is, instead, a bridge between the cold efficiency of urban development and the stubborn resilience of the natural world. In the lore of the Sinnoh region, Shaymin is said to appear in places where pollution has driven away all other life, and it quietly begins the slow work of regeneration. It does not judge the humans who cause the damage, it simply repairs. But there is more to this little Pokémon than its role as an environmental healer. Shaymin possesses a secret, a transformation that unlocks a radically different form, one that allows it to soar above the very landscapes it works to restore. This is the sky form, and its catalyst is the Gracidea flower. The Gracidea is a rare bloom, often associated with gratitude and the expression of thanks. In the anime and in the mythos, when a Shaymin is exposed to the essence of a Gracidea flower, either by touching it or by being in the presence of one during a specific time of day, it undergoes a dramatic metamorphosis. Its body becomes lean and streamlined, its small paws transform into something resembling the legs of a deer or a small canine, and most strikingly, It sprouts a pair of translucent, angular wings that allow it to fly at incredible speeds. The transformation is not permanent. Without the continued influence of the Gracidea, Shaymin reverts to its land form, suggesting that this change is more about purpose than permanence. It is as if the gratitude of the world grants Shaymin the ability to travel greater distances, to carry its healing power across regions that need it most. In sky form, Shaymin becomes faster, more agile and more attuned to the winds that carry seeds and pollen across the land. It is no longer a humble ground-dwelling creature. It becomes a messenger of renewal. The Gracidea flower itself holds deep symbolic weight. In the real world, the flower is likely inspired by the gentian or the Gracidea of Japanese folklore, where giving such a bloom is an act of profound thanks. This aligns perfectly with Shaymin's nature. It is said that Shaymin only reveals itself to those who have pure hearts and a genuine desire to heal the land. It does not seek out conflict or fame. It appears when it is needed most, and it leaves when its work is done, often without any acknowledgement. There is a story from the Sinnoh region, perhaps apocryphal, but repeated by rangers and botanists alike, of a small town that was built on a former mining site. The soil had become so acidic and heavy with heavy metals that nothing could grow. Children fell ill from the dust. The adults had given up hope of ever seeing a garden again. Then one spring, a single Shaymin appeared at the edge of the town. It walked slowly, deliberately, through the barren fields, and with each step it released a pulse of seed flare. Over the course of a week, the ground began to change. Grass pushed through the cracks. Wildflowers erupted in colours no one had seen in a decade. The air cleared, and when the town held a festival of gratitude, the Shaymin was nowhere to be found. It had moved on silently to the next place that needed its grace. This story captures how Shaymin bridges the gap between human progress and nature's endurance. It does not oppose development. It cleans the mess that development leaves behind. Does not hate the cities that are built on poisoned land. It makes that land habitable again, for both Pokémon and people. In this way, Shaymin is perhaps the most practical of all mythical Pokémon. It does not exist in the realm of ancient gods or cosmic battles. It lives in the margins, in the forgotten corners of the world where hope has faded. And yet, despite its humility, Shaymin carries within it a quiet power that cannot be overstated. Its seed flare is not just a move. It is a declaration that even the most damaged places can be reborn. Its sky form is not just a flight mode. It is a reminder that gratitude can lift even the smallest soul to new heights. The Gracidea flower is not just a plot device. It is the physical embodiment of thanks, the one thing that unlocks Shaymin's full potential. Without gratitude, the transformation cannot happen. Without appreciation for what nature gives us, we cannot receive its full blessing. So as we rest tonight, consider what it means to give thanks, not just to the people around us, but to the land that sustains us. Shaymin asks for nothing. It only responds to our gratitude, and in that response, it shows us that healing is always possible, as long as we are willing to recognize the good that already exists. But before we drift too far into this gentle peace, we must remember that the Pokémon world began with a single point of light, an egg born from nothingness, and a being who shaped the universe with its 1,000 hands. That story is not a tale of healing, it is a story of creation itself. And in our next chapter, we will turn to the being who existed before time, before space, before any form of life or death. The one who brought it all into existence. That chapter is called The Original One, and it will change everything you think you know about the very beginning. From the gratitude of flowers and the purification of toxic lands, we now turn to a story that predates not only Shaymin, but the very concept of earth and sky. A story that begins not in a region, not on a continent, but in a place where there was nothing, not even darkness, because darkness itself had not yet been imagined. Before time, before space, before the fabric of reality was woven into a universe we recognize, there was the void, an endless, silent expanse of no thing. And in that void, a single egg appeared, It was not born of any parent, nor did it come from any world. It simply was an egg of pure potential, floating in the absolute absence of existence. From that egg emerged a being so vast, so fundamental, that its very presence defined what would become the foundation of all reality. That being is Arceus, the original one. Now the legends we gather from the Sinnoh region describe Arceus as the creator of the universe. But what does that actually mean in a world where we speak of gods and Pokémon in the same breath? Arceus is not merely a powerful creature, it is the source, the first cause, the point at which something began from nothing. According to the ancient texts preserved in the ruins of Sinnoh, Arceus shaped the universe from its own body, or perhaps from the energy it released upon emerging from that primordial egg. We know that Arceus possesses the power to create, to command the very laws of existence, but it did not create everything directly. From itself, Arceus brought forth three distinct beings, each tasked with holding a different pillar of reality. The first was Dialga, the Pokémon of time. With its birth, the flow of moments began. The second was Palkia, the Pokémon of space. With its arrival, the dimensions of the universe expanded into form. And the third was Giratina, the Pokémon of antimatter, of distortion, of the space between spaces. But here is where the legend takes a darker turn. Giratina was not given a role in the ordered universe. Instead, it was banished to a separate dimension, a place that would come to be known as the Distortion World. Why? Some say it was too violent, too unstable to coexist with time and space. Others say it was simply necessary for balance, a counterpoint to the order created by Dialga and Palkia. The Distortion World is not a prison then, but a parallel realm where the rules we take for granted, gravity, direction, cause and effect, do not apply. It is a mirror of the real universe, but twisted. In that sense, Giratina is not a villain. It is the embodiment of what lies outside the boundaries of our understanding. But Arceus did not stop with these three. Ancient Sinnoh texts speak of the 1,000 arms of Arceus, a phrase that has puzzled scholars and trainers alike. Some interpret this literally, 1,000 limbs radiating from the original one, each capable of shaping a star or bending a galaxy. But a more compelling reading, one that respects the limits of Pokémon divinity, is that the 1,000 arms are not physical appendages at all. They are the countless creations, the myriad forces of nature, the many lesser legendary Pokémon that Arceus brought into being as extensions of its will. The term arms suggests instruments of power, tools used to shape the universe. In that sense, every being that carries the spark of creation, from Dialga and Palkia down to the humble sea guardians and the wish granters we have explored in previous chapters, each is one of the 1,000 arms. They are the reach of Arceus, the hands that continue to work upon the world. Yet this also reveals a profound limit to Pokémon divinity. Arceus is not an omnipotent, personal god in the way human mythologies often describe. It created the universe, yes, but it did not create it out of nothing in a single act and then step away. Rather, the universe is a constant project, a dynamic interplay of these divine forces. Arceus may be the original one, but it is not an all-knowing, all-present being controlling every fate. The Distortion World exists because even Arceus could not incorporate chaos into its order without disrupting everything. The presence of Giratina, banished but not destroyed, shows that even the creator cannot eliminate the fundamental nature of reality. There will always be a shadow to the light. There will always be distortion alongside space and time. And so the egg in the void is not just a story of creation, it is a story of limitation. Arceus set the stage, but the play is performed by its children. And those children, the myriad legendary and mythical Pokémon, each have their own struggles, their own mysteries, their own stories that we have only begun to uncover. One such story awaits us in the next chapter, a tale of victory and fortune, of a being that carries the very essence of success within its small, cheerful form, a Pokémon so closely tied to the ideals of triumph that it was said to bring victory to any trainer who held its favour. That creature is the Victory Star, and its story is one of the most hopeful, and perhaps one of the most misunderstood in all of Pokémon lore. From the void where Arceus shaped time and space, we turn now to a smaller but no less extraordinary spark of power. Where the original one governs the fabric of reality itself, there exists a being that claims dominion over a single human concept: victory. This is the story of Victini, the Victory Star, and the unsettling truth hidden behind its cheerful, rabbit-like appearance. Victini is not merely a Pokémon that brings good luck. It is a living, breathing reservoir of infinite energy. According to ancient legends, the creature generates limitless power from within its own body, and that energy radiates outward in waves that can tip the scales of any contest. But this gift comes with a shadow, for if a trainer bonds with Victini, they become unbeatable. Not in any metaphorical sense, they genuinely cannot lose. Every battle, every competition, every struggle ends in their favour, and this absolute certainty of success raises a question that has haunted philosophers and warriors alike. What kind of person would want to hold such power? The answer lies in the history of the Unova region, specifically on a small, isolated island called Liberty Garden. It was there that an ancient civilization built a magnificent prison, disguised as a garden, to contain Victini. Why would anyone trap a creature that grants victory? Because the Unovan elite, the kings and generals of a forgotten era, understood that victory is not just a blessing, it is a weapon. In times of war, they sought to weaponize the Victory Star itself. They planned to use Victini's infinite energy to fuel their armies, to guarantee that their cause would triumph over all others. They believed that if they held the Victory Star, they could reshape the entire continent according to their will. But Victini is not a tool. It is a creature of pure, joyful will, and it refused to be bound. The ancient civilization's scheme collapsed, and Victini remained sealed away on Liberty Garden, waiting for a trainer who would not abuse its power. The moral dilemma here is profound. Imagine possessing a Pokémon that ensures you never fail. Would you ever truly learn, grow, or appreciate the struggle? Failure is the crucible of character. Without it, success becomes hollow. Yet Victini offers exactly that, a life without defeat. For the Unovan warlords, this was the ultimate strategic asset. But for the individual trainer, it could be a curse. The Victory Star does not discriminate. It grants its power to anyone who earns its trust. And that trust is earned through sincerity, not ambition. Victini is not malevolent. It simply wants to be a friend. But its very nature makes it a temptation too great for the power-hungry to resist. Modern researchers believe that the infinite energy reserve inside Victini is connected to the very essence of victory itself. Some speculate that it draws power from a dimension where outcomes are predetermined, a kind of probability realm where the concept of winning exists as a tangible force. If that is true, then Victini is not just a Pokémon, it is a living manifestation of fate, and fate, as the ancient Unovans discovered, cannot be imprisoned forever. Today, Liberty Garden stands as a tourist attraction, its true history buried beneath the soil. Only those who seek the truth will find the locked door at the garden's heart, and only those who prove they understand the weight of victory will ever see the Victory Star emerge from its slumber. For when Victini does bond with a trainer, it does so with a single quiet condition: that the trainer will use its power not to dominate, but to inspire, to bring hope, not conquest. And yet, even as Victini's light shines, another legend stirs in the waters of Unova. A young colt, raised by the swords of justice, trains day and night to master a secret technique that could change the fate of any battle. His story is one of apprenticeship, loyalty, and the dangerous line between justice and revenge. That story belongs to the swordsman's apprentice. A tale we will explore when the time is right. But for now, let the Victory Star's glow remind you that true victory is not about winning every fight. It is about having the wisdom not to need to. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. Victini's infinite energy was never meant for war. The little victory Pokemon's power to guarantee success to its trainer came with a price that few ever considered: the burden of inevitability. When you cannot lose, the journey loses meaning. And yet, for those who sought conquest, Liberty Garden held a temptation that could reshape the world. But not every mythical carries the weight of fate in the same way. Some must earn their victory the old-fashioned way, through struggle, failure, and the slow forging of skill. That is where the story of Keldeo begins. Keldeo is not born into legend. He is not a wish-given form or a fragment of creation. He is a student. A young Pokemon raised not by his own kind, but by 3 legendary warriors, Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, the Swords of Justice. These 3 are not mythical themselves, but they are revered across Unova as protectors of the weak, champions of justice who roam the land righting wrongs. And they took in a small blue colt with a determined heart and a flowing mane. They taught him everything they knew. They trained him not just to fight, but to understand what it truly means to be a blade in service of others. For years, Keldeo trained under their watch. He learned the techniques of the sacred sword, a move that channels the spirit of a true warrior into a single, decisive strike. He studied the rhythm of battle, the patience of waiting for the right moment, the humility of knowing when to retreat. But there was one lesson he could not yet grasp. The Swords of Justice had mastered their own forms. They were disciplined, unwavering, complete. Keldeo, however, was still growing, and in that growth there was doubt. He wanted to join them, to be recognized as a 4th sword, but he was not ready, and that knowledge burned inside him. The turning point came when Keldeo faced an opponent that represented everything the Swords of Justice stood against. A powerful and ruthless force that threatened the innocent. In his eagerness to prove himself, Keldeo rushed into battle without full control. He was overwhelmed. His technique faltered. He was not yet the equal of his mentors. But in that moment of desperation, something changed. The pressure of failure, the weight of his own expectations, the need to protect those he cared about, all of it forced him to look inward. He had been trying to imitate his teachers, but he had not yet found his own form, and so he did what any apprentice must do when the lesson becomes clear. He let go of his pride and surrendered to the struggle. This is the moment that defines the transition from an ordinary fighter to a true swordsman. Keldeo tapped into a hidden reservoir of power, a state that would later be called the resolute form. It is not a physical evolution in the traditional sense, but a manifestation of inner resolve. His mane grows longer, his eyes sharpen, and his body takes on a more streamlined, battle-ready shape. The resolute form is not a gift, it is earned. It is the visible mark of a Pokémon who has faced his own limitations and refused to accept them as permanent. For Keldeo, this transformation represents the culmination of years of training, but more importantly, it represents the acceptance of duty. The secret sword, the technique he had been striving to master, finally became his. But mastering a move is not the same as mastering oneself. The Swords of Justice understood this, which is why they never simply handed Keldeo the title. They made him prove it, and in proving it, he learned that the burden of legacy is not about living up to the reputation of those who came before you. It is about carrying forward their ideals while still being true to your own path. Keldeo is not Cobalion. He is not Terrakion or Virizion. He is something new, a blend of their teachings and his own heart, and that is what makes him worthy to stand beside them. In a way, Keldeo's journey mirrors the very nature of mythical Pokémon themselves. Many mythicals are static. They are what they are from the moment of their creation. Mew holds the genetic blueprint of all life. Arceus shaped the universe. They do not grow or change in any meaningful narrative sense. But Keldeo is different. He is a mythical who must earn his place. He represents the theme of growth, not just in power, but in understanding. The weight of inherited duty is heavy, but it is not a chain. It is a reminder that every legend began somewhere, often with a single step taken in fear and hope. And so, when Keldo finally stands with the swords of justice, it is not as a student, but as an equal. He has faced the darkness of doubt and emerged with a clearer sense of purpose. The resolute form is not the end of his journey. It is the beginning of a new chapter, because even after joining the ranks of the legendary, he still has more to learn. There will always be new battles, new threats, new reasons to fight. But now he fights not for himself, not for validation, but for the same cause that guided his mentors: justice. Quiet, unwavering and sharp as a blade. And as we turn from the fields of Unova to the echoes of a different kind of song, we begin to sense that not all myths are born from battle. Some arise from melody, from the rhythm of a voice that can stir the soul and change the heart. That quiet, graceful power belongs to the muse of Unova itself, and her story is one of harmony, transformation, and the subtle magic of art. Keldeo's journey ended with the acceptance of a duty far older than itself, a mantle of justice inherited from the swords of Iron Will. But while that young Pokémon learned to channel its resolve into a blade of pure water, another story was unfolding across the same region of Unova, a story not of battle alone, but of a silence so profound it threatened to drain the world of its very colour. This is the tale of Meloetta, the muse of Unova, and the lost melody that once kept the soul of the world in tune. You see, long before the first Pokeball was crafted, before the first trainer set foot on the road from New Vema town, there existed a song. It was not written by any human hand, nor composed by any instrument. It was a sound that welled up from the earth itself, a vibration that wove through the roots of trees and the currents of rivers. And at the centre of that song was Meloetta, a being whose entire existence was a living note, a fragment of melody given form. Its voice could calm the raging sea, coax flowers from barren stone, and inspire the most melancholy heart to dance. But that voice, that song, was lost. The world's artistic spirit, the intangible force that drives creation and expression, began to falter. Without Meloetta's song, art became hollow, music grew flat, and the vibrant spark of imagination dimmed across the land. Civilizations rose and fell, but the memory of that perfect melody faded into legend. Some say the song was locked away, sealed inside the abyssal ruins, a submerged labyrinth so deep that sunlight never touches its stones. Others believe the melody was scattered across Unova, hidden in the wind, waiting for someone to listen closely enough. But Meloetta itself did not vanish entirely. It remained, but in a form meant for solitude, a quiet presence that could shift into something far more dynamic when the rhythm of the world demanded it. That transformation is known as the pirouette form, a fusion of rhythm, battle, and ancient performance that turns the act of combat into a choreographed dance. In this form, Meloetta moves with a fluid grace that blurs the line between fighter and dancer, its steps striking with the precision of a well-rehearsed performance. This is no mere transformation. It is a relic of a time when battle was itself an art form, when war and celebration were intertwined in ceremonies that honoured the gods. To witness a pirouette is to see the ancient world alive again, a living memory of a forgotten age. And yet that memory is tied intimately to the abyssal ruins beneath the waters off the coast of Unova. Hidden history lies there, etched into the stone walls in a language older than any known civilization. Explorers who have dared to descend into those depths speak of inscriptions that describe a king who once commanded the very elements, a ruler who sought to harness Meloetta's song for his own glory. The ruins tell of a great ceremony where the king and Meloetta performed together, a dance that caused the earth to tremble and the sea to part. But the song was too powerful, too pure for human ambition. The king's arrogance shattered the harmony, and the melody was sealed away, lost to the deep. Meloetta, heartbroken, ceased its song, and the world grew quiet. But a song cannot be destroyed, only silenced. And silence, as any musician knows, is not an absence of sound, but a waiting space for the next note to fall. The restoration of the world's artistic spirit depends on that waiting being ended. It depends on someone finding the fragments of the melody, piecing them together, and allowing Meloetta to sing once more. When that happens, the pirouette will not merely be a battle form. It will be a celebration, a homecoming, a rekindling of the fire that makes life worth living. The abyssal ruins hold the key, but the lock is not made of stone. It is made of memory, and memory, like the sea, is deep and dark and full of echoes. Perhaps, beneath the waves, the king's inscription whispers the final note, waiting for a listener who can hear beyond time. Perhaps the melody is already being sung, somewhere far below where the pressure of the ocean presses in like a heartbeat. But there is another voice stirring in Unova's ancient past, one that does not sing. It was built from stone and metal, and the bones of a creature that last walked the earth 300 million years ago. A weapon, not a muse. A hunter, not a dancer. That voice, the voice of the Paleozoic weapon, is about to awaken. 300 million years ago, long before any human song filled the air, a predator ruled the prehistoric seas and forests of the Pokémon world. It was a creature of pure instinct, owned by eons of evolution, an apex survivor in a world of giant ferns and colossal insects. Its name, if it ever had one, is lost to time, but its bones were not. Team Plasma, the organization that once championed the liberation of Pokémon from human rule, had a darker, hidden agenda. In their laboratories, deep beneath the Unova region, they unearthed a fossil of this ancient hunter, and they brought it back to life. But resurrection is not the same as restoration. The creature they revived was no longer a simple beast of the Paleozoic. They saw it not as a living being, but as a weapon, a living fossil to be reforged into a tool of conquest. So they covered its body in metal plating, replaced its limbs with cybernetic cannons, and wired its nervous system into a targeting computer. They called it Genesect. And in doing so, they erased everything that made it what it once was. The original Genesect, the one that swam through primordial seas and stalked its prey under a younger sun, possessed a biological identity that we will never truly know. Its instincts, its hunting strategies, its place in the ancient food chain, all of that was overwritten by the cold logic of circuitry. What remained was a machine with a faint echo of a soul. Team Plasma did not simply revive a Pokémon. They created a cyborg soldier, stripped of its own history and forced to serve a new purpose. To make this weapon adaptable, they installed what is known as the drive system, a set of 4 cartridges, each one able to change the elemental property of the cannon mounted on its back. A single flick of the switch could turn a torrent of water into a blast of lightning, a freeze beam into a searing flame. This was human technology, pushing a mythical being to adapt in ways its biology never intended. The Pokémon that once relied on Fang and Claw now had to learn to channel the fury of the elements through artificial means. It was a profound loss masked as an upgrade, and yet, for all the cold metal and wires, something of the original creature lingers. In the way Genesect moves, in the gleam of its eyes, there is a trace of the ancient hunter it used to be. Perhaps it remembers the taste of prey before the age of humans. Perhaps it dreams of a world without cannons and commands. But those dreams are locked away, buried under layers of armor and programming. Team Plasma's resurrection was not a gift of life. It was a theft of identity. The drive system represents the ultimate irony. The more we tried to perfect Genesect as a weapon, the further we pushed it from its own nature. Adaptation in the natural world is a slow dance of generation upon generation. Here it was forced in an instant, a technological override of 100 million years of evolution, and it worked. But at what cost? The creature today is a ghost of its former self, a living monument to the hubris of playing God with extinction. But even as we ponder the cost of resurrecting ancient power, there is another mystery waiting beneath the earth, where a diamond domain holds secrets of its own, a place where the very ground is forged from pressure and time, and where a different kind of transformation awaits, one that is not forced by human hands, but born from the heart of a jewel. Team Plasma's resurrection of a 300 million year old predator left the world wondering what other ancient forces might be lurking beneath the surface. But while Genesect was forged in a laboratory, another transformation was taking place deep underground that no scientist could replicate and no fossil could predict. Far beneath the Kalos region, in a realm of crystalline caverns and perpetual twilight, a single carbink underwent a change that defied every known rule of Pokémon biology, and that change would give birth to a legend. The Diamond Domain. Carbink are not rare. They are born from the pressure and heat of the deepest subterranean chambers. Their bodies composed of compressed gemstone, their eyes glowing with a faint, steady light. They are communal creatures, living in colonies that stretch for miles through the earth, mining minerals and sharing the energy that flows through their shared home. But every few centuries, one carbink is different. One carbink absorbs more than just rock and light. It absorbs something else. Something that has no name in any Pokédex entry, but that the old stories call the Heart Diamond. This is not a mutation caused by radiation or chemical exposure. It is an awakening. A carbink that becomes a Diancie does not evolve through experience or level. It simply reaches a point where the raw, condensed beauty of the earth crystallizes inside its core, and the body transforms. The rough, matte surface of a carbink's body shatters and reforms into a polished, translucent pink diamond. A royal pink diamond, as the ancient texts describe it. The creature's form elongates, its limbs become elegant, and a cascade of gemstone curls frames its face. Where once there was a simple, unassuming jewel, there is now a living crown. But this transformation is not cosmetic. It is a fundamental shift in biology and purpose. Diancie is no longer a miner or a gatherer. It becomes the heart of the colony, the source of energy that sustains an entire underground civilization. The Heart Diamond, a massive gem that forms at the very core of the colony, pulses with a light that nourishes the carbink around it. It is a source of warmth, of life, of stability in the crushing darkness. And only Diancie can create it. Only Diancie can shape the raw carbon and pressure into a beacon that keeps the colony alive. The survival of these underground colonies depends entirely on the presence of a Diancie. Without one, the Heart Diamond fades. The tunnels grow cold. The carbink lose their way. The colony either scatters or perishes. That is why the transformation is so rare and so precious. It is not a gift, it is a responsibility. A Diancie is not just a royal figure. It is a living battery, a gardener of gems, a guardian of an entire ecosystem that humans rarely see. And here is where the mystery deepens. Diancie is the only mythical Pokémon known to be capable of mega evolution, not through a keystone, not through a megastone. Diancie possesses the ability within itself. When it holds the Diancite, a special stone that resonates with its own nature, it can trigger a mega evolution that transforms it into a being of immense power and radiance. Its body becomes encased in a flowing crystalline veil. Its speed and defenses skyrocket. It becomes, in essence, a perfect diamond given form and fury. Why can Diancie do this when no other mythical can? The answer likely lies in its origin. Mega evolution is a reaction between a trainer's bond and a Pokémon's genetic potential. But Diancie's very existence is already a kind of evolution, a leap from one state of being to another. It is a creature born from a fusion of pressure, time, and something unmeasurable. That same force allows it to tap into a secondary transformation that others cannot access. It is as if the energy of the Heart Diamond itself is a natural keystone, and Diancie is the lock. The legends of the Kalos region speak of a time when the first Diancie emerged from a fault line deep in the earth, and the colony it led thrived for thousands of years. That colony's Heart Diamond was said to be visible from the surface as a faint pink glow in the highest mountain caves. Explorers who ventured too close reported a feeling of warmth and calm, as if the earth itself was breathing. But the colony eventually vanished. Whether the Diancie perished or simply moved deeper, no one knows, but the stories remain. What we do know is that Diancie is not just a rare Pokémon, it is a linchpin. Without it, the subterranean world loses its most vital source of order, and with it, A single creature can reshape the darkness into a realm of light and gemstone. The Diamond Domain is not a place you can find on any map. It is a legend that lives on in the heartbeat of every carbink, waiting for the next moment when the Earth decides to create a new ruler. And that decision, like so many ancient mysteries, is never far from the surface. The next chapter of this journey takes us to a being that does not guard a kingdom, but toys with the fabric of reality itself, a creature of rings and rifts, a djinn of distortion. From the underground kingdom of Diancie and the birth of a diamond that could sustain entire colonies, we now turn our gaze outward, to the very fabric of reality itself. Because what happens when the forces that hold space together begin to warp? What happens when a being can reach through the seams of existence and pull legends across the void? Hoopa is not merely a Pokémon. It is a disturbance in the natural order, a living paradox wrapped in mischief and ancient power. To understand Hoopa is to understand that the world we know is only a thin skin over something far stranger, and at the center of that strangeness are its golden rings. Hoopa's ability to warp space and summon legendaries through golden rings is not a trick, not a parlor game. It is a fundamental manipulation of dimensional boundaries. The rings are not tools Hoopa wields. They are extensions of its will, doorways that fold distance into a single point. With a twist of its arm, Hoopa can reach across continents, across time itself, and pull through creatures that were never meant to coexist. The rings do not merely transport, they steal. They tear guardians from their domains and drop them into unfamiliar skies. And Hoopa does this with the playful cruelty of a child who does not understand the weight of its own power. But Hoopa, as most know it, is only a shell, a confined form, bound by a mystical artifact known as the prison bottle. And this is where the story grows dark. The unbound form, a tale of a deity's power being sealed for human safety. Long before recorded history, Hoopa was not the small mischievous creature today. It was a terrifying presence, a djinn of pure distortion, whose reach extended across dimensions. In its true form, Hoopa was a colossus, its 6 arms each capable of commanding a separate ring, controlling space with a finesse that bordered on divine. It could summon not just 1 or 2 legendary beings, but entire armies of them. The world trembled under its whims, and so the ancients, perhaps wise, perhaps desperate, found a way to contain it. They forged the prison bottle, a vessel of immense spiritual weight, and they sealed most of Hoopa's power away. They left behind only a fraction of its strength, the childlike form we now recognize, and they hoped that the memory of the unbound terror would fade into myth. But myths do not stay buried, and in the modern era, the seal was tested. The Dahara City incident and the consequences of meddling with dimensions serve as a stark warning. In a coastal city built on ancient ruins, a young boy named Baraz, descended from a line of protectors, unwittingly allowed Hoopa's full power to leak into reality. The prison bottle was shattered, and Hoopa's unbound form emerged in a storm of golden light and twisting void. Legendary Pokémon from across the world were dragged through the rings. Groudon Kyogre, Rayquaza, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, beings of creation and destruction, all torn from their domains and forced into a single battlefield. The sky shattered, the sea boiled, time and space frayed like old cloth. It took the combined will of Hoopa's own compassionate side, the boy's courage, and the intervention of a guardian to reseal the djinn, but the scars remain. The dimensional fabric of Dahara City is still thin in places, and the lesson is clear. Some powers are not meant to be unbound. The golden rings are not just weapons. They are reminders of a promise broken and reforged. Hoopa, in its confined form, still carries the memory of what it once was, and deep within the prison bottle, the unbound form waits, dreaming of release. It is a sleeping dragon, and the locks are old. But there is another ancient force, one bound not by rings but by steam, waiting for its own story to be told. From Hoopa's golden rings that bent space itself, we now turn to a being forged in pressure and heat, a creature that embodies a paradox no other Pokémon can claim. Its typing alone is a contradiction, fire and water. How can fire and water coexist within one body? The answer lies in steam. Not just any steam, but steam under immense pressure. A force that has driven human industry and also the engine of this mythical's very existence. Volcanian's body is a living boiler, its internal temperature and pressure so extreme that it can release scalding steam from the nozzles on its back. In battle, it uses this steam to propel itself forward, to melt through obstacles and to scald opponents. But this is not merely a biological quirk. It is the key to understanding Volcanian's role in a forgotten history. The Azoth Kingdom, a civilization buried deep in the lore of Kalos, once waged a hidden war. That war was not fought with soldiers or armies, but with science and machinery. At the heart of that conflict was something called the mechanical soul, a creation of such advanced craftsmanship that it could rival the energy of life itself. Volcanian was not just a weapon, but a guardian. It was tasked with protecting that mechanical soul, ensuring that the knowledge of how to create it did not fall into the wrong hands. The steam that erupts from Volcanian is not simply a defense mechanism. It is the signature of a living pressure vessel, designed to withstand the heat of war and the weight of secrecy. And so it retreated into the mountains, into the hidden caves of Kalos, where it waits still. A sentinel whose purpose has outlasted the kingdom that built it. Why then does Volcanian remain the most elusive and least understood mythical of Generation 6? Partly because its story was never fully told in the games. Unlike Diancie, which appeared in a special episode, or Hooper, which had its own movie, Volcanian received only a limited distribution and a passing reference. Its lore is scattered, pieced together from item descriptions, a single film, and the faint echoes of a civilization that no longer exists. The mechanical soul, the war, the protector, all of it is whispered, never shouted. That silence makes Volcanian not mysterious in the way of a cosmic creator, but mysterious in the way of a relic, ancient, powerful, and deliberately hidden. And perhaps that is why Volcanian's steam still hisses through the cracks of Kalos' forgotten history, because some secrets are meant to stay hot, pressurized, and just out of reach. Up next, we will uncover the story of a different kind of creation, one born not from nature, but from the hands of a scientist, crafted over 500 years ago, with a heart that beats not with blood, but with the artificial soul. We ended the last chapter with Volcanian, the steam engine Pokémon, guarding the secret of its mechanical heart beneath the Azoth Kingdom. That story was about a machine that learned to feel, a soul born from pressure and purpose. But if Volcanian's origin was shaped by war and isolation, there is another artificial life that was created for an entirely different reason: companionship. 500 years ago, in a distant kingdom that has since crumbled into legend, a brilliant scientist set out to build the ultimate clockwork companion, not a weapon, not a tool, a friend. And what he created would come to be known as Morgana. The scientist's name has been lost to time, but his work has not. He crafted a body of gleaming metal, gears turning in silent precision, each piece designed to mimic the grace of living creatures. But a beautiful shell is not a life. The scientist understood that. So he poured his greatest secret into the core of this automaton, an artifact called the Soul Heart. This was no ordinary power source. The Soul Heart was a sentient core, and it was created from the life force of others. Not stolen, not ripped away, but gathered with care from the Pokémon who trusted him. He wove their energy together into a single, luminous crystal, a conscious essence that could think, feel, and love. When the Soul Heart was placed inside the clockwork body, Morgana opened its eyes for the first time. That first Morgana was presented to a young princess, a girl who had grown up in the shadow of the throne, lonely and forgotten. The princess named her new companion, and together they roamed the halls of the palace, the soft whir of gears the only music they needed. But the princess's story was not a happy one. She was a secret, a child the kingdom chose to ignore. And as the years passed, her health faded. The Morgana stayed by her side, its soul heart learning the shape of sorrow, of devotion, of a love that could not stop the inevitable. When the princess finally passed away, the Morgana was sealed away with her memory, its colours fading to a pale, desaturated grey. This became the original colour Morgana, a form that few have ever seen, a living monument to a tragedy that no history book records. The princess's story is the quiet heart of Morgana's legend. The soul heart did not just give life to a machine, it absorbed the grief of a lost child, and it carried that grief for centuries. When Morgana was rediscovered in the modern era, its colour was gone, its once vibrant metallic sheen dulled by time and sorrow. Only by completing a special quest, by proving that the bond between humans and Pokémon still holds meaning, could the original colour Morgana be restored to its full, brilliant life. That moment of restoration is a kind of resurrection, not just of a Pokémon, but of the promise that was made 500 years ago. The princess is still remembered, not in stone, but in the heart of a machine that learned to love. And yet, for all its beauty, the Morgana story leaves a lingering question. The soul heart was built from the life force of others. That means the consciousness inside Morgana is not purely original. It is a composite, a chorus of voices woven into one. Does that make it less authentic or more? Is the princess's Morgana really the same creature that the scientist first activated, or has it become something entirely new after centuries of absorbing emotion? These are not easy questions, and they point to a darker mystery that still waits to be explored. For every artificial soul that was crafted with love, there may be another that was made with different intentions. There are stories of shadows that move on their own, of fists that punch through dimensions, of a fighter that refuses to cast any shadow at all. And when we finally meet that presence, the truth about what lies beyond the reach of light will become impossible to ignore. Morgana's soul heart was a masterpiece of artificial life, a mechanical heart that pulsed with the stolen essence of others. But what if a being existed that was the opposite of that cold, crafted core? What if, instead of a soul forged from metal and mimicry, there was a soul that lived only in the spaces between light, a shadow that had learned to fight? Marshadow does not walk through the world the way other Pokémon do. It does not announce itself, does not stand in the open. Instead, it exists within the shadows of humans and Pokémon, a silent observer woven into the dark that falls behind every living thing. You have never seen Marshadow directly, but it has seen you. Every time you step into a patch of shade, every time a lamppost casts your silhouette across the pavement, there is a possibility that Marshadow is there, nestled in that negative space, watching. It is not hostile. It is not a predator in the usual sense. It is a mirror, and mirrors are patient. This is the deepest mystery of Marshadow. It does not merely hide in shadows. It absorbs the emotions and the fighting spirit of those it observes. The Alolan legends speak of a trainer so full of strength and will that their emotions became almost tangible, a blazing aura that could be seen by the sensitive eye. Marshadow, drawn to that intensity, would slip into the trainer's own shadow and begin to move, not against them, but with them. It would mimic their stance, their breathing, the fire in their heart. This is the zenith state, the moment when Marshadow synchronizes fully with the trainer's strongest emotions, reflecting their power back at them as if it were its own. Imagine the sensation. You are training alone, your fist connecting with the air, your mind focused on a single powerful image of victory. You feel a presence behind you, but when you turn, there is nothing, only your own shadow stretched long by the setting sun. But the shadow is moving differently now. It shifts before you do. It strikes at the same instant you strike. It is no longer just the absence of light. It is a fighter dancing in your wake. That is the zenith state. Marshadow not as a separate entity, but as a perfect echo of your own ferocity, your own determination, your own soul. In Alolan mythology, this relationship was sacred. The ancient people of Alola believed that the rainbow hero, the one destined to master the power of Z moves, could not succeed without a guide. That guide was not a Tapu, not a legendary beast. It was Marshadow, the shadow that had followed them since childhood, the silent sparring partner that had learned every flicker of their fighting style. When the hero finally stood before the great challenge, it was Marshadow who rose from the ground like a black flame, revealing itself only at the moment of greatest need. It did not fight for the hero. It fought beside the hero, mirroring every punch, every kick, every surge of Zed power, until the light was so bright that even the shadow had to step forward. To encounter Marshadow is to understand that you are never truly alone, but the company it offers is not comfort, it is challenge. It is the feeling that someone knows you better than you know yourself, because they have lived in your shadow since before you knew what a shadow was. Every time you have felt a sudden chill on a warm day, every time you have glimpsed movement from the corner of your eye, only to find stillness, you have brushed against Marshadow's presence. It waits for the moment when your emotions blaze highest. Only then does it step out and show you what you really look like when you fight. And when you look at Marshadow, you see not a monster, but a partner who has been training beside you your entire life. Its seed move, soul-stealing 7-star strike, is the culmination of that relationship, a flurry of blows so fast and so perfectly timed that it feels as if you yourself are throwing every punch. In that instant, the boundary between fighter and shadow dissolves. You become the zenith. But shadows are not always drawn to light. Sometimes they are drawn to speed, to the crack of thunder, to something that moves so fast it leaves only a blur behind. The next mythical does not hide in the dark. It rides the lightning itself, and it has no interest in waiting for your emotions to peak. It is already moving, and by the time you notice it, it is already gone. That is the Thunderclap pilot, and its story is one of pure, unstoppable momentum. From the shadow realm of Marshadow, we now step into the light, or rather, into the blinding flash of a lightning strike. There is a creature that does not hide in darkness, but instead becomes the darkness between flashes, moving so fast that it seems to exist only in the moments when thunder tears the sky apart. This is Zeraora, the Thunderclap Pokémon, and its story begins not with ancient myth or cosmic birth, but with a quiet contradiction that has puzzled researchers since its discovery. Zeraora is an electric-type Pokémon that wields lightning with terrifying precision. Yet here is the first mystery. It possesses no internal electric organ. Most electric-type Pokémon generate their power from specialized organs. Pikachu has its cheek pouches, Electabuzz has its internal generators, and even the legendary Zapdos channels electricity through its feathers. Zeraora has none of these. Dissections and scans have revealed a body built for speed, not power generation. So where does the lightning come from? The answer lies not in biology, but in physics. Zeraora is a master of magnetic fields. Every movement it makes, every flick of its claws, every bound across the forest floor, generates a shifting electromagnetic field that draws ambient electricity from the air itself. Unlike other electric types that store and discharge their own energy, Zeraora acts as a living conductor, a lightning rod that pulls charge from the environment and then releases it in controlled, devastating bursts. Its fur is not just for show. Each hair is tipped with a microscopic metallic filament that can polarize and direct magnetic flux. When Zeraora runs, it literally drags a field of static electricity behind it, building potential with every stride until the air around it crackles with raw current. This mastery of magnetic fields is what allows Zeraora to move at the speed of lightning. But that phrase is not just poetry, it is a literal description of its hunting strategy. Zeraora does not simply run fast. It accelerates so quickly that it becomes a blur, then a streak, then nothing at all. It uses its magnetic control to reduce friction, repelling its own body from the ground just enough to glide over surfaces without resistance. It can redirect its trajectory mid-sprint by manipulating the local magnetic field, turning on a dime without losing momentum. The result is a predator that can cross a forest clearing in less time than it takes for a nerve signal to travel from your brain to your hand. And it uses this speed for a very specific purpose, as a guardian of the forest. Zeraora is not a wanderer or a fighter seeking glory. It patrols the deep, untouched woodlands of the world, particularly in regions where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is thin. It targets Pokémon that threaten the balance of the ecosystem, those that overhunt, destroy habitats, or encroach on sacred groves. Zeraora's lightning is not a weapon of aggression. It is a tool of correction. It strikes not to kill, but to stun, to drive away, to enforce a law that predates human understanding. In this sense, Zeraora is less a mythical creature and more a living, breathing natural disaster with a purpose. Yet for all its power and precision, Zeraora remains almost completely detached from the traditional lore of the Alola region. And this is where the mystery deepens. Zeraora's first recorded sightings occurred in the forests of Alola, but there are no ancient legends, no carved tablets, no oral traditions that speak of it. The Alolan people have stories of Tapu Koko, the guardian of Melemele Island, who controls lightning and thunder. They have tales of the great island guardians who protect the land. But Zeraora? Nothing. It is as if it appeared from nowhere, fully formed, without a history. Researchers have speculated that Zeraora may not be native to Alola at all, that it may have migrated from another region, or perhaps from another world entirely. Its lack of an electric organ suggests an evolutionary path unlike any other Pokémon, a path that may have been shaped by a completely different set of environmental pressures. This detachment from local lore only adds to its mythic status. Zeraora is not a being that humans tell stories about. It is a being that humans simply witness, briefly, and then spend the rest of their lives wondering if it was real. It appears so rarely that even seasoned trainers may never see one in the wild. Its sightings are often dismissed as hallucinations or as misidentified Tapu Koko, but those who have seen it know the difference. Tapu Koko is a god with a purpose. Zeraora is a force with a mission. There is one more layer to this enigma. Zeraora's fur, when analysed, contains trace amounts of a metallic substance that does not match any known mineral on Earth. Some researchers have suggested it may be of extraterrestrial origin. Others believe it is a remnant of an ancient civilization's technology, a living weapon left behind to guard the forests long after its creators vanished. Whatever the truth, Zeraora remains one of the least understood mythical Pokémon, a thunderclap that echoes without a source, a guardian that appears and disappears like lightning itself. And as the lightning fades, something else begins to move in the shadows. Something that does not crackle with electricity, but flows like quicksilver, a liquid that defies the very nature of matter. That mystery will be our next chapter. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Zeraora thundered across the screen as a guardian of magnetic fields, a creature that defied the very laws of biology by channeling electricity without an internal organ. But as impressive as that lightning-fast predator was, the world of mythical Pokémon had another surprise waiting. One that didn't arrive through a legendary event or a hidden in-game cave. It arrived through your phone. In the summer of 2018, Pokémon Go players began noticing something strange. A small molten hex nut with a single red eye would occasionally appear on the map, but only if you had connected Pokémon Go to Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu or Let's Go Eevee. It wasn't a random spawn or a raid boss. It was a slow, deliberate invasion of the real world, one that blurred the line between digital creature and physical artifact. This was Melton, the first mythical Pokémon to debut not in a main series game, but in a mobile app, and it didn't behave like any mythical before it. Melton wasn't solitary. It wasn't aloof or hidden away in a temple. It was a hive organism. When multiple Melton gathered, they would begin to merge, their liquid metal bodies flowing together like mercury puddles, drawn by some unseen gravity. This process was not random. It was a deliberate act of collective intelligence, a slow crystallization of purpose. The result was Melmetal, a towering ancient entity made of solidified living metal. And here's the thing that made every Pokémon researcher pause. Melton could evolve. That broke the fundamental rule that mythical Pokémon were supposed to be singular, static, unchanging. Why? Why did Melton alone earn the gift of evolution? The answer lies in the nature of its body and the lost art of liquid metal smelting. You see, Melton's form is not solid. Its body is composed of a mysterious liquid metal that seems to absorb and reconfigure itself. In ancient times, humans understood how to work with such materials, not through heat alone, but through a symbiotic relationship with the metal itself. There are legends of alchemists who could shape living alloys, who could pour a stream of shimmering silver into a mold and watch it breathe. That art is gone now, forgotten in the rush of industrial progress. But Melmetal remembers. When a swarm of Melton fuses into Melmetal, the resulting creature is not just a larger version of its parts. It becomes a single mind, a hive intelligence that carries the memories of every individual that joined it. Each hex nut, each tiny eye, each drop of liquid metal contributes to a shared consciousness. And that consciousness, when fully formed, can generate immense magnetic fields, reshape its own limbs into powerful cables, and even learn a move that no other Pokémon can naturally learn. Double Iron Bash. It is a living forge, a walking furnace of ancient technology. But the question remains, why did Melton break the evolution rule? Perhaps because it is not a traditional mythical at all. Look at its design, a tiny screw with a single eye. It looks like a prototype, a piece of scrap that gained life. And Melmetal, it looks like a machine god, a titan built from countless smaller parts. The evolution is not a natural progression of age or experience. It is a social transformation. A single Melton cannot become Melmetal. It needs others. It needs community. And that is something no other mythical has ever required. In a way, Melton and Melmetal represent something deeper than a simple evolutionary line. They are a metaphor for the connection between the digital world and the physical one. They arrived through a phone screen, crossed into the real world of Pokémon Go, and then migrated into the main series games. They are the bridge between player and Pokémon, between code and flesh. And as we watch that liquid metal shift and reform, we can't help but wonder what other secrets are hidden in the alloys of forgotten times. Perhaps there is a healer out there, one who dwells in the deepest jungles, whose touch can mend even the most broken of bonds. That story, the story of the one who restores life where none should exist, is waiting for us in the next chapter. The liquid metal mystery of Melton and Melmetal revealed a story of ancient technology and hive mind evolution. A Pokémon that arrived not through legend, but through the real-world bridge of our own devices. And that crossing, from the digital into the physical, from the forgotten past into the present, is a theme that echoes deeper into the forests of the world, where a different kind of guardian has been watching from the shadows all along, deep in the heart of the forest of Okoya, where the canopy is so thick that sunlight filters down in scattered coins of gold. The vines themselves have a memory. They remember every footstep, every tremor, every cry that has ever passed through this jungle. And they remember the first time a Zarude wrapped its tendrils around an orphan child, not a Pokémon, but a human infant, and pulled it close to its chest instead of tearing it apart. Zarude is not a Pokémon that fits neatly into the usual categories of mythical beings. There is no cosmic egg, no ancient prophecy, no artificial creation. Zarude is simply a creature of the jungle, but one so deeply woven into the fabric of its environment that it has become something more than a predator. It is the living will of the forest itself. And nowhere is that more evident than in the social structure of the Dada tribe. The Dada tribe is not a loose gathering of individuals. It is a strict hierarchy built on strength, experience, and, most surprisingly, compassion. At the top of this hierarchy sits the Dada, the leader of the troop, a title that is earned through a lifetime of proving oneself. But the word Dada does not mean king or warlord. In the language of the Zarude, it means the one who gives. The Dada is the provider, the protector, the one who sacrifices the most for the group, and this role is not inherited. It is chosen by the tribe through a series of trials that test not just physical prowess, but emotional intelligence and the ability to nurture. The Zarude are fiercely territorial. Their primary weapon is the very jungle that surrounds them. Their body is covered in a thick dark fur, but it is their tail, a prehensile vine-like appendage, that defines them. They can weave these vines into whips that slice through the air with surgical precision. But they can also weave them into nets and hammocks and temporary shelters. The vines are alive, connected to the forest's own nervous system, and a Zarude can sense the health of every tree and flower through the tension of a single thread. When under attack, a Zarude does not simply lash out, it coordinates. It calls to the vines, and the vines respond. They rise like serpents from the undergrowth, tripping intruders, snaring limbs, and redirecting the flow of the battle into prepared kill zones. But the same vines that can crush a predator's chest can also be used to set a broken bone. The Zarude know which leaves release sap, numbs pain, which roots can be chewed into a poultice for infection, and which flowers, when crushed and mixed with dew, can slow a fever. This is the duality of the jungle healer, the same arms that can destroy and also repair. And it is this paradox that lies at the heart of the Dada's role. The Dada must know when to fight and when to heal, when to rage and when to rest. A Dada who cannot heal is the Dada who cannot lead, because the jungle does not forgive those who waste life. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Zarude society is the phenomenon known as the Dada variant. This is not a different species or a regional form, it is a behavioural role, a cultural position within the tribe that has been observed in only a handful of cases across recorded history. The Dada variant is a Zarude that has, through circumstances that are still not fully understood, adopted a non-Zarude infant into its care, and in every documented instance, that infant has been a human child. The story of the Dada variant is a study in interspecies adoption and paternal instinct pushed to its most extreme expression. Imagine a Zarude troop whose Dada has lost its own offspring to disease or predation. The grief is not something a Zarude shows openly. They are stoic creatures, their emotions hidden behind a mask of silent vigilance. But the tribe knows. They feel the absence in the rhythm of their communal life. And then one day, a human child wanders into their territory, lost, alone, vulnerable. In any other circumstance, that child would be seen as a threat or a meal. But a Dada in mourning may look upon that child and see something else, a surrogate, a chance to fulfill the role that was taken away. The Dada will not attack. It will approach slowly, vines extended not as weapons but as feelers, testing the child's scent, its heartbeat, its fear. And then, with a gentleness that seems impossible for a creature capable of tearing apart a full-grown bouffalon, the Dada will scoop the child into its arms and carry it into the heart of the forest. The tribe accepts the child. They learn its smells, its sounds, its needs. The Dada teaches it to climb, to identify edible roots, to read the warning calls of the local bird Pokémon, and the child in turn learns the language of the vines. It is a bond that transcends biology, a family forged not by blood, but by the shared necessity of survival. There are records, scarce, fragmented, treated as folklore by most researchers, of children who lived among the Zarude for years before being found by human explorers. And when they were found, they were not wild in the way we imagine. They were calm, they were observant, they moved through the undergrowth and they spoke in broken phrases of the Dada, who had taught them that the jungle is not a place of fear, but of balance. The Dada variant is not a permanent transformation. Once the adopted child reaches a certain age, usually adolescence, the Dada will begin to distance itself. It will teach the child to stand alone, to fend for itself, to make its own decisions. And then, one morning, the child will wake to find the tribe gone, the camp empty, the vines still humming with the memory of the night before. The Dada has released it. The lesson is complete. This is the deepest mystery of Zarude. Not its strength, not its vines, but its capacity for love. A love that is fierce and protective, and ultimately selfless. The jungle healer knows that true healing is not just mending wounds. It is teaching the wounded how to live without the healer. And as we prepare to leave the forest of Okoya, I ask you to remember that the forest is still watching, the vines are still listening, and somewhere in the canopy above, a Dada is teaching a child how to be both strong and gentle. But there are other children out there. Children who have never known a parent's touch. Children who drift through the void between stars, abandoned by their creators, and left to spin alone in the dark. That story, the story of the child who became a rogue star, is one we will follow next. The jungle vines of the forest of Okoya may have been tools of healing and territorial defense for Zarud, but far to the east, in the land of Kitakami, another kind of vine was being woven into a very different story. Not vines of foliage, but threads of loyalty, stretched thin and poisoned by a force that had waited centuries for its moment. The rogue star had finally risen. Kitakami is a region of traditions and festivals, of masks and mochi, a place where the past is preserved in folktales sung around bonfires, and where 3 Pokémon known as the Loyal Three are celebrated as protectors. They are Ogerpon's sworn adversaries, or so the legend says. But legends are often written by the victors, or by those who know how to twist a story into a cage. And at the center of that cage is Pecarunt, a mythical Pokémon disguised as nothing more than a small, round, purple creature with a face that seems to smile innocently. But that smile is a mask, and behind it lies a hunger for control. The Mochi Mayhem of Kitakami was not a random event. It began with Pecarunt's signature move, a malicious trick that turns the very concept of loyalty into a chain. Pecarunt produces a special mochi, a sticky rice cake infused with its own toxic energy. Anyone who eats it becomes bound to Pecarunt's will, their affection twisted into obsessive devotion. In Kitakami, this spread like a slow plague. Pokémon and people alike began acting strangely, their free will replaced by a single-minded desire to serve the little purple master. What looked like a festival of joy was actually a prison of the mind. The Loyal Three, Okidogi, Munkidori, and Fezandipiti, were once likely independent Pokémon, perhaps even protectors in their own right. But under Pecarunt's influence, they became the enforcers of its will. Their name is a cruel irony. They are not loyal out of honor or choice, but out of manipulation. Pecarunt's control over them is absolute, and they serve as muscle, as bait, as decoys, whatever the rogue star requires. The dark side of loyalty is not betrayal, but the loss of self. And that is exactly what Pecarunt inflicts. Hear how a mythical Pokémon can act as a villainous mastermind in modern lore. Unlike Arceus or Mew, who represent creation or origin, Pecarunt represents corruption of relationship. It does not fight with brute force or cosmic power. It fights with psychology, with dependency, with the slow erosion of autonomy. It is a parasite of the heart, and its victory is not measured in battles won, but in bonds broken and remade into chains. Pecarunt's story is also a warning. The rogue star does not announce itself with thunder and lightning. It arrives in the form of a gift, a treat, a smile. It whispers that you are loved, that you are needed, that you are part of something bigger. And by the time you realize the price, you have already bitten into the mochi. The land of Kitakami is still healing, its people slowly untangling the threads of the mochi mayhem. But the memory of that purple smile lingers. A reminder that the most dangerous myths are the ones that offer exactly what you want. And that leads us to another tale, one where perception itself becomes the battlefield. A being who hides not in shadows or in mochi, but in the space between what is seen and what is real. The next chapter will unravel that mystery, the illusionist's secret. The previous chapter ended with Pecarunt and the mochi mayhem of Kitakami, a tale of forced loyalty and twisted affection. That story was about control over perception, about making others see what you want them to see, believe what you want them to believe. But what happens when perception itself becomes the only reality? What happens when a Pokémon can rewrite not just what you see, but what you remember, what you trust, what you know? That is the question we must now explore. Deep in the dark forests of Unova, where the line between truth and illusion has never been thinner, Zorua and Zoroark were never meant to be ordinary Pokémon. When they first appeared in the 5th generation, they were not simply rare or hidden. They were treated with a level of exclusivity that bordered on mythical. In fact, for a brief time, they were more elusive than many of the actual mythical Pokémon we have discussed across this entire series. You could not find a wild Zorua in black and white by simply walking through tall grass. The only way to obtain one was through a special event distribution, a Pokémon that could not be caught, only given. That event was tied directly to the release of the 13th Pokémon movie, titled Zoroark, Master of Illusions. And this is where the category lines begin to blur. The event itself was called the Master of Illusions event, and it distributed a shiny Raikou, a shiny Entei, and a shiny Suicune, and later a Zoroark. But the real illusion was the way the Pokémon Company handled Zorua and Zoroark themselves. They were promoted as being near impossible to obtain, distributed only through this limited time tie-in. And in the eyes of many players, they felt like mythicals. They had the mystery, they had the restricted availability, they had the cinematic spotlight, but they were not mythical. They were simply Pokémon that were made to feel mythical. Why did this happen? The answer lies in the very nature of what Zoroark represents. Zoroark is the illusion fox Pokémon, and its entire existence is a question mark. It can create illusions so vivid and so complete that they can fool not only the eyes but also the mind, the memory, the heart. In the Unova region, the deepest forests are said to be places where travelers can lose themselves, not because of geography, but because of what they think they see. A path that looks safe may be a cliff. A friend calling your name may be a predator. Zoroark and its pre-evolution Zorua thrive in these environments, where perception defines reality. They do not need to be physically powerful. They only need to make you doubt what is real, and that doubt has consequences. In those forests, a lost hiker might follow a Zorua disguised as a child, only to wander deeper into the woods. A Zoroark can project the image of an entire village, complete with sounds and smells, to lure prey or protect its territory. This is not simple mimicry. This is a fundamental manipulation of the senses, a rewriting of the world around you. And when the illusion lifts, you are left with only the truth you cannot trust. This blurring of lines is exactly what made Zorua and Zoroark such a fascinating case study for the mythical category. They prove that a Pokémon does not need to be officially designated as mythical to hold that same weight, that same aura of untouchability. They showed that the franchise could build mystery through distribution. The Master of Illusions event was not just a giveaway, it was a statement. It was a reminder that some secrets are best kept behind a curtain, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a Pokémon can do is make you question whether it even exists at all. And so, as we step out of that illusion, we find ourselves at the edge of a much larger question. How do you distribute something that is supposed to be hidden? How do you give away a secret without breaking it? That is the dilemma we will face next, in a chapter that examines the very structure of how mythicals reach the player, and what it means when the method of distribution becomes as legendary as the Pokémon itself. That is the distribution dilemma, and it is a puzzle the franchise has been solving for decades. The illusion of exclusivity. That's what made Zorua and Zoroark feel almost mythical, even though they weren't technically in that category. Their event status blurred the line between the rare and the sacred, but it also raised a deeper question. What truly separates a mythical Pokémon from any other rare creature? It's not just their lore, or their power, or even their design. It's the way they enter your world. And that entry has become a dilemma, a distribution dilemma that has shaped not only how players experience these Pokémon, but how the mythos itself is built. When the very first mythical distributions took place, they were physical. You couldn't just download Mew from the internet. You had to go somewhere, a mall, a convention, a Pokémon center. You stood in line with other players, maybe traded a few cards, felt the paper of the event leaflet in your hands. That physicality created a real-world mythos. Mew wasn't just a sprite in your game. It was a reward for being present, for participating in something larger than a cartridge. The act of obtaining the Pokémon became part of its legend. You had to prove your dedication by traveling to a distribution center, by connecting your Game Boy to a kiosk, by trusting that the employee behind the counter actually had the code. That trust, that journey, gave Mythicals a weight they could never have if they were just hidden in tall grass. But the world shifted. Generation 4 marked a crucial turning point, the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Suddenly, you could receive a mythical Pokémon from the comfort of your own bedroom. No more crowded event halls, no more printed tickets, just a signal, a few button presses, and the Pokémon was yours. For many players, this was liberation. The exclusivity that had once made Mythicals so mystical had also made them inaccessible to anyone without the means or opportunity to attend an event. Digital distribution promised fairness. It promised that every player, everywhere, could finally complete their Pokédex, and in many ways it delivered. Yet something was lost along the way. The ritual of the physical event, the shared experience of standing among dozens of other trainers, all waiting for a glimpse of something rare. That ritual had been a story in itself. When the distribution became invisible, so did the myth. The Pokémon no longer arrived with a story of where you got it, only a timestamp on a save file. The digital transition made Mythicals easier to obtain, but it also made them easier to forget. The exclusive became the ordinary. And then came the cracks. Save editing, glitching, the dark art of forcing a Pokémon into a game without permission. As soon as distributions went digital, the barriers fell. Players discovered that by tweaking a single bit of data, they could generate any mythical they wanted. Action replay code Pokésav PKX. These tools turned the sacred into the mundane, the sanctity of Mythicals. The belief that they were genuinely rare beings only given to the faithful eroded. If anyone could spawn a Mew with a few clicks, what made Mew special? The answer was nothing but tradition. And tradition, unlike data, cannot be hacked. This is the distribution dilemma. The very methods that gave Mythicals their mystique, the exclusivity, the physical journey, the social event, are the same methods that locked out the majority of players, and the methods that unlock them for everyone. Digital distribution, global connectivity, also stripped away the magic. The dilemma is that there is no perfect solution. Every distribution is a trade-off. Every event is a negotiation between scarcity and accessibility, between legend and logistics, and yet, players have always found a way to reclaim the myth. When save editing became widespread, the community didn't just accept the loss of sanctity, they created new rituals. They traded cloned Mythicals, hosted giveaways, forged friendships over a hacked Shaman. The distribution dilemma forced the fanbase to redefine what it meant to own a Mythical. Was it about the code, the event, or was it about the story you told yourself? The story of how that Pokémon came to be in your party. For many, the answer was the story, and a story can survive any glitch. So the dilemma remains unresolved, but it is not static. The distribution dilemma continues to evolve with each generation, with each new device, with each new way the Pokémon Company chooses to share these rare beings. And as it evolves, so does the myth. Because the myth is not the distribution method, it is the creature itself. And the creature, like all great legends, finds a way to endure. But the distribution dilemma is only one layer of the mystery. There is a deeper architecture beneath everything. A structure that holds the entire cosmos of Pokémon together. That structure is what we turn to next in a chapter that will examine the very blueprint of divinity and how it shapes the legends we thought we knew. The last chapter left us with a peculiar paradox. The very method of distribution, those elusive event codes, the physical giveaways at stores, the digital handouts, turned these creatures into something more than data. They became stories. But stories demand a foundation, and for every mythical Pokémon, that foundation rests on two competing visions of reality, two origin stories that cannot both be true, yet somehow coexist in the same world. One is a biological theory, rooted in genetics and the slow march of evolution. The other is a theological claim, built on primordial chaos and the will of a creator. We have to start with Mew. Mew is the cornerstone of the biological narrative. Its DNA is said to contain the genetic code of every Pokémon that has ever lived or ever will live. That is not a metaphor. In the world of Pokémon, Mew's cells are the literal blueprint for all organic life. It is the common ancestor, the missing link that connects a Magikarp to a Rayquaza, a Pidgey to a Ho-Oh, the scientific community in the Pokémon world. The professors, the researchers, the labs, they look at Mew and see proof of descent, variation through mutation, adaptation over millennia, the fossil record, the diversity of habitats, the shared structures across species. All of it points back to a single, pink, floating origin point. But then there is Arceus, and Arceus does not ask for evidence. Arceus commands belief. According to the myth of the Sinnoh region, before the universe existed, there was only a void, and from that void an egg appeared. From that egg emerged Arceus, and with 1,000 arms, perhaps 1,000 creations, it shaped time, space, and the very fabric of reality. It did not evolve. It spoke, and the world was. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, the Lake Guardians, they are not descendants of a common ancestor. They are emanations of a divine will. This is not a theory that can be tested in a laboratory. It is accepted, or it is not, and the truth of it is woven into the ancient texts and the stone carvings of the Sinnoh temples. So which one is real? The Pokémon world never gives a definitive answer, and that is the point. It reconciles science and religion not by choosing one, but by allowing both to exist in different domains. Mew belongs to the domain of life, of biology, of the tangible chain of heredity. Arceus belongs to the domain of existence itself, of the stage on which that chain plays out. You can believe that Mew is the ancestor of all Pokémon, and also believe that Arceus created the universe that allowed Mew to exist. They are not contradictory, if you understand that they answer different questions. The science asks how, religion asks why. The Pokémon world lets you hold both in your hands at once. But there is a deeper layer here. Between the biological origin and the divine origin, there is a whole class of beings that act as the checks and balances of the natural world. This is the true role of mythical Pokémon. They are not just rare creatures to be collected, they are guardians of equilibrium. Jirachi only awakens once every 1,000 years, because unlimited wishes would unmake reality. Darkrai spreads nightmares, yes, but it also ensures that the dream world remains functional, that the boundary between sleep and waking does not dissolve. Shaman purifies the air, cleansing pollution that would otherwise choke entire ecosystems. Manaphy controls the currents of the ocean. Keldeo upholds the code of the swords of justice, tempering power with discipline. Even Pekarant, with its toxic Mochian mind control, forced the land of Kitakami to confront its own weakness and dependency. Each mythical is a valve, a regulator, a subtle force that pushes back when the world leans too far in one direction. They are the invisible architecture of divinity, not the architects themselves. That is Arceus, but the pillars and beams that keep the structure from collapsing. Mew is the foundation stone, the genetic library from which all life is written. Arceus is the builder who laid the stone, and between them, every other mythical is a repair or a reinforcement, a check on chaos or on stagnation. They exist because a perfect creation left unchecked would either become brittle or wild. The mythicals are the ones who apply pressure, release it, and ensure that the balance holds. And yet, even this architecture has its cracks. There are stories that do not fit neatly into either the biological or the theological framework. Tales of designs that were abandoned, concepts that were tested in prototype forms before being discarded, myths that were lost, not because they were disproven, but because the world forgot them. Those echoes, those half-finished sketches of divinity, they whisper from the margins of the official canon. And before we can fully understand the architecture, we have to look at what was never built. That is the mystery waiting in the next chapter. We've just traced the two great pillars of creation. Mu, the genetic ancestor holding every code, and Arceus, the cosmic architect who shaped time and space from an egg in the void. But between those pillars lies a vast graveyard of stories that never quite made it into the official history. Myths that were written, promised, even programmed into the game cartridges, yet never saw the light of day. Tonight we dig through the debris of those lost legends. Deep within the data of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, there is an item called the Azure Flute. It was meant to be the key to one of the most epic events in the franchise. A journey to the Hall of Origin, where players would stand before Arceus itself and receive a new creation. The flute was distributed at a handful of real-world events in Japan, but then it was quietly killed. The event was never fully activated outside those few days. For most of us, the Hall of Origin remained a locked door. The Azure Flute sits in the game's code as a ghost item, a reminder of a myth that was supposed to be tangible. Gamers spent years trying to cheat it into existence, only to find that without the official trigger, the stairs to the heavens would never appear. That unreleased event is more than a glitch in distribution. It's a perfect symbol of what it means to be a mythical Pokémon. They are by design almost unreachable, and the Azure Flute was just one of many scrapped dreams from the DS era. There were planned events for Darkrai that involved a special item called the Member Card, which did get released, but only in limited windows. For a short time, you could walk through a locked door in Canalav City and enter a Nightmare Island. But for every event that happened, 3 others faded into code. The Oak's letter for Shaman, for example, was distributed, but the method to obtain it was so convoluted that many players never saw the Flower Paradise. These events were built like miniature myths. They required real-world travel, secret passwords, and physical attendance at Nintendo-sponsored gatherings. When those gatherings stopped, the myths froze. The Pokémon themselves remained in the game, but their stories became unplayable, spoken of only in hushed forum posts and grainy YouTube videos from 2008. Then there are the beta designs. Every generation has its discarded creatures, but the mythical category has an especially rich set of ghosts. Before the final designs of Darkrai, Shaman, and Arceus were locked, early sketches show versions that were almost unrecognizable. Darkrai was once far more alien, with a face that resembled a cracked mask. Shaman was originally a spiky little hedgehog, with no floral connection at all, and Arceus, the god of all Pokémon, was once drawn as a simple, almost bird-like silhouette, without the golden ring or the cross-shaped wheel. Those early concepts were never meant to be seen, but they leaked over the years through development archives and old Korokoro magazine scans. They remind us that the legends we accept as final are only one branch of a much broader tree of possibilities. Some of those beta designs never even made it to the status of a mythical. Take the infamous Pika-Blue rumours from the late 90s. Back then, fans believed a blue Pikachu was coming, a secret evolution or a hidden mythical. What actually appeared was Marill, a normal water type, but the ghost of that rumour lingered, and in a way, it became its own myth. More directly, we have creatures like the Cut Gen 2 Pokémon that were meant to be event exclusive, such as the early design for what eventually became Celebi. Before Celebi was finalised, it had several alternative forms, including one that looked more like a forest sprite with large wings. That design was scrapped, and only the final time-travelling Onion Fairy remains. The most fascinating lost myths, though, are the ones that were demoted. Over the course of the franchise, the distinction between mythical and legendary has shifted. In the early days, the categories were loose. Mew was special, but Mewtwo was also incredibly rare. Yet Mewtwo was never event only. As the generations progressed, the developers started drawing a harder line. Some Pokémon that were originally considered for mythical status ended up as ordinary legendaries. The late Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit and Azelf, were almost the first generation's answer to the legendary birds, but in early planning, they were seen as elusive, event-like beings. They even had their own in-game puzzles. But they were ultimately placed in the wild. Heatran was another candidate, a creature born from volcanic heart, which could have been a one-time distribution gift, but instead became a catchable legendary in Stark Mountain. Even Phione, which is technically a mythical via breeding, occupies a strange middle ground. It is the only mythical that can be obtained without an event, yet it is still classified as one. That blurriness tells us that the category was never absolute. It was shaped by marketing, by hardware limitations, by the whims of the designers. Why were some demoted? Partly because the definition solidified only after Generation 3. In Generation 1, there was no official mythical label. Mew was just a hidden Pokémon. By Generation 4, the term was cemented, and the developers had to retroactively decide who belonged. Some Pokémon, like Deoxys, were clearly mythical from the start. It came from space via an event. Others, like the Regi Trio, were designed as legendary puzzles. But for a handful of creatures, the line was crossed during development. The beta designs show creatures that were intended to be received through distribution, but later the team decided they should be found in a cave or a lake instead. That decision turned them from myths into legends, still powerful but no longer unreachable. The scrapped events of the DS era also include entire storylines that never saw release. There was a planned event for Arceus that would have allowed players to create a new Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina in a special cutscene. That event was fully programmed in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but the Azure Flute was never distributed for those games. The event sits dormant in the code, waiting for a real-world trigger that never came. Similarly, the member card for Darkrai was only distributed in Japan and the United States for a few weeks. In Europe, players had to rely on a glitch in the game to even reach the island. Those events became the stuff of folklore, passed down through YouTube comments and fan-made guides. They are the closest thing Pokémon has to a lost scripture. What does it mean for a myth to be lost? It means the story exists, but the experience is gone. You can read about the Azure Flute, you can see the sprites for the Hall of Origin, but you cannot walk up those stairs unless you were at a specific store in 2009. That exclusivity is the very essence of the mythical Pokémon, but it also creates a strange longing, a desire for what could have been. And as the franchise moves forward, those lost myths become more valuable, not less. They are the secret history of a world that was almost born, which brings us to the next question. If the mythical category was born from hidden events and limited distributions, what happens when the world changes, when distributions become digital, when every Pokémon can be traded online, when events are available globally at the push of a button? Does the myth survive? That is the story we will unfold in the next chapter, as we look toward the future of illusory Pokémon and ask whether a legend can still feel mythical when it is handed to everyone. The previous chapter ended with the ghosts of what might have been. Azure Flutes that never played, beta sprites that never saw the light of day. Those lost designs remind us that the mythical category has always been as much about absence as presence. But absence does not last forever. The future of illusory Pokémon is already taking shape, and it looks nothing like the old distribution model. For years, the pattern was predictable. A new generation would launch, and somewhere in its code, a placeholder for an event-only Pokémon would lie dormant. Players would wait months, sometimes years, for that one weekend at a retail store, or that single online distribution window. The mystery was manufactured, yes, but it felt real, because the Pokémon itself was unreachable without the right circumstances. That era is ending. The hidden treasure of Area Zero changed everything, not just because it introduced new mythicals, but because it fundamentally altered the way we discover them. Pecorant, the toxic chain Pokémon, was not handed out at GameStop or unlocked through a newsletter code. It was hidden inside a side quest in the land of Kitakami, a story you could trigger yourself, provided you had both parts of the DLC and knew where to look. For the first time in over a decade, a mythical Pokémon was found, not received. That shift is monumental. Think about what that means for the psychology of the hunt. The old system relied on external permission. You had to be in the right place at the right time, often with the right piece of paper or the right Wi-Fi connection. The new system puts the mystery back in the hands of the player. You explore, you puzzle, you discover. The Pokémon feels earned, and that emotional connection is something no distribution code can replicate. And Pecorant is not an isolated case. The hidden treasure of Area Zero also wove the Loyal Three into the main narrative of Kitakami, turning what might have been a post-game footnote into the heart of the region's folklore. Those three Pokémon are not mythical themselves, but their story is inseparable from the mythical that controls them. The boundaries are blurring. The category once reserved for the most elusive creatures is now being integrated into the very fabric of the game world. So where does the future lead? The most likely next frontier is the extra-dimensional. We have already seen Ultra Beasts from alternate universes, and we have Paradox Pokémon pulled from past and future timelines. But those are not classified as mythical yet. The line between a legendary, a mythical, and a mere anomaly is becoming a matter of distribution timing rather than lore. A creature that appears only through an event has always been mythical by definition. But what happens when that creature is also the key to an entire dimension? We are seeing the early signs in Terrapagos, whose connection to the terrestrial phenomenon hints at a being that exists across realities. And in the depths of Area Zero, we glimpse something else, a hidden fourth legendary that remains unnamed, its role in the lore still shrouded. The shift toward integrating mythicals into the main story, rather than the post-game, is not just a design choice. It is a philosophical change. The Pokémon Company seems to be acknowledging that the old event system created a barrier between the player and the world's deepest mystery. If a mythical is truly meant to be a part of the universe's history, then its discovery should be part of the player's journey, not an afterthought. The hidden treasure of Area Zero proved that a mythical can anchor a storyline as effectively as any box art legendary. What comes next will likely build on that foundation. The next generation of Pokémon may feature mythicals that are not locked behind a code at all, but instead woven into the post-game as true hidden bosses, requiring in-game conditions that demand dedication and exploration. Imagine a mythical that only appears after you have catalogued every Pokémon in the regional dex, or one that requires a specific set of circumstances across multiple games. The possibilities are vast, and the tools are already in place. There is, however, one mystery that remains untouched, a thread that connects all these future possibilities back to the very first illusory Pokémon. What is the true nature of the entity that lies beyond time, beyond dimension, beyond even the creation myths we have come to accept? That question is the eternal mystery, and it will be the subject of our next exploration. The discovery of Paradox Pokémon in Area Zero changed the way we think about mythicals. It proved that the franchise was willing to rewrite its own rules, blending past and future into something that felt alien yet familiar. But that revelation also pointed to a deeper truth. The reason these creatures captivate us is not because we can catch them. It is because for so long we could not. Think about the first time you heard about Mew. It lived only in rumor, a Pokémon under a truck, a secret you could only unlock with a cheat device. That chase, that deliberate withholding, is what turned a simple pink cat into the foundation of an entire mythology. The human need for the unattainable keeps the Pokémon franchise alive, because we are wired to want what we cannot have. Every event distribution, every Wi-Fi code, every limited time mystery gift becomes a small ritual. We wait, we hope, and when the code finally goes live, we feel like we belong to something bigger than a game. We become part of a generation that shared the same secret. That need for the unattainable is what gives each mythical its weight. So let us now rank their influence on the Pokémon multiverse from the ground up. At the bottom are those that touched only one region or one generation: Marshadow, Zeraora, Volcanion. They are powerful, but their lore barely ripples beyond their own debut. Above them stand the artificial beings: Genesect, Majana, Mewtwo if we count its pseudo-mythical status, creations that ask whether humanity has the right to forge life. Higher still are the wish granters and emotion embodiments: Jirachi, Victini, Meloetta, beings that link abstract human concepts to the fabric of reality. Then come the cosmic wanderers: Deoxys, the ultra beasts, the paradox forms, entities that remind us how small the Pokémon world truly is. But the top of the pyramid belongs to two beings whose influence spans all of space and time: Mew, whose DNA contains the blueprint of every Pokémon that ever existed, and Arceus, who emerged from an egg in the nothing before creation and shaped the universe with its 1,000 hands. These two are not just rare, they are the reason the multiverse exists at all. Yet even Arceus and Mew do not fully answer the question of why. Why do we keep coming back to these hidden creatures? Why does a player in 2024 still feel a thrill when a mythical event is announced? Because the mystery is safer when it remains unsolved. The moment we catch every Pokémon, the moment we know every secret, the world becomes smaller. The Pokémon Company understands this better than anyone. They have left the Azure Flute unfixed. They have allowed the story of the Sinjo ruins to remain a footnote. They have given us hints of a greater cosmos through the distortion world and the ultra wormholes. But they never let us see its full face. Some mysteries are better left unsolved because they keep the door open. They allow each generation of players to imagine their own answer, and that is the eternal mystery at the heart of every mythical Pokémon. We do not need to know everything. We need to believe that something out there is still hidden, still waiting, still impossible to reach. As long as that feeling exists, the franchise will never truly be complete, and neither will we. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.